4, 3. Welcome to the Ham Radio Workbench Podcast, your bi-weekly deep dive on technical topics of interest to the radio amateur. Well, on today's show, we do have a very special guest, and that's Eric Swartz WA6HHQ from Elecraft. So we're going to get the lowdown on what's new at Elecraft, and in particular, we're going to talk about remote station operating and how Elecraft radios are particularly good for that sort of thing. So we'll dive into that in more detail in a few minutes. But if this is the first time you've joined us, we're happy that you're here. We have over 230 episodes in our back catalog on all kinds of topics, and check it out on our website, hamradioworkbench.com. You can also check us out on Facebook. The group is Ham Radio Workbench, and you can also go to our Discord. And if you want to go to the website, you'll find a link to get into the Discord. We have lots of different channels on everything from your home projects, what's on your workbench, to other technical topics and portable operating and such.
And non-technical topics?
And non-technical, that too.
There's a channel called Homebrew that is not about making your own radio.
Good point. Thank you.
I can claim I'm homebrew.
Well, I've lost control already. I'm not even done with the intro. If you'd like to talk with us live and direct, you can talk with us on the Brandmeister DMR Talk Group 31075 or the All-Star Node 55915. So, well, with that out of the way and no interruptions up to now, I want to welcome our guest, Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hey, how you doing, George and guys?
We're doing great. We're so happy you're here. And I got to mention before we go any further that we're in the final countdown to Hamvention when we're recording this. So by the time you folks listening to the show listen to this, Hamvention will have come and gone. But we're actually recording this show before Hamvention. And so the fact that Eric's even available this close to the show is a minor miracle. So Eric, thank you for being with us today.
No
Okay,
problem.
George, we have to edit that out and replace it with, man, Hamvention was awesome. Didn't you guys love that presentation that time?
Oh, yeah. And the Elecraft booth, man, the thing was jammed all the time with that new KX4 announcement. That was unbelievable.
It was so good.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to edit that out. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey,
All right.
can we pause just for 1 second, George? I need to close the window. I'm going to get glared out by the sun as it sets here. Hold on. I'm not closed, but the shades. There we go.
That's a
All
nice
right.
long pause.
Any dogs barking or anything else going on that we should know about?
I hope not. Actually, I got to do a little bit different.
Low-flying aircraft.
Well, that's
It's
possible.
not bringing bright stuff into the room here. So still
You're good.
look okay on your end?
It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
I just noticed it reflecting off my glasses, and I started getting blinded because as the sun gets lower here, it comes in here pretty
It
bright.
wasn't your glasses.
Okay.
I can make that joke. None of the rest of us
Okay,
can.
here we go again, guys.
So also on the show today, we have Mike VA3MW. Hey, Mike.
Good evening.
How's
from the
things in
Great White
Toronto?
North. We still haven't seen anything that looks like summer. It's still cold. Anyway, all good. Our hockey team is doing very well, but I don't jinx that. Anyway.
I assume we're going to get an update on the shack rebuild, the remote station rebuild.
Oh, the more of the chainsaw stories that Thomas and I have been trading. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Chainsaw North.
We're getting there.
Oh, man. And also we have Thomas K4 SWL. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
It's going great out here. How's it going where you are?
We haven't had any cataclysmic storms this week. We haven't had any wildfires on the road this week. We did have dime-size hail today, which wasn't on my bingo card.
No locusts, I assume?
No locusts.
Oh,
No
locusts.
locusts yet.
Oh,
But
good.
I was literally, my daughter said, you get these like weather alerts all the time, and they'll say like severe thunderstorm warning, and then it'll say something about, winds could be 60-mile-per-hour gusts or something. And of course, it's rarely that. In the spring here in Western North Carolina and the Southeast, we get a lot of pop-up thunderstorms. It's just, they'll just pop up out of nowhere in the spring. And this was one of those, and I thought, it's just saying something about hail. It's not going to really do it. Oh, it really did it. To the point that I ran outside, and there was a tarp that I had ready for my truck because I need to do a big run to the transfer station with it. I need to cover it. So I grabbed the cover of that, and I threw it over the top of our new to us Subaru because it was not under any other kind of cover. And it was pretty crazy, but other than that, things are going pretty well.
I was expecting you to say, yeah, I went outside and got a concussion.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
It could happen.
It could happen.
Well, and apparently also we have Mark N6MTS. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
You
y'all
made your
doing?
presence known twice already. I should at least say hello. How are things in Central Cal?
Acknowledge my presence. We are still green season, and it is beautiful. We only get green hills around here for a few months of the year, and this green season started early and is lasting a long time. And all the mustard plants, wildflowers, are blooming right now on the hills, which is just one of the most gorgeous things in the world, except for the fact that that stupid mustard is the reason I have to take a Claritin every single day. They are murder on allergies, but they really do paint up the hillside gorgeously. So
Well, it sounds
Central
nice.
California is doing really nice.
Well, up here in Portland, Oregon, it's green, but it's always green. So-
Yeah, no, California is mostly brown and gray most of the time.
Well, so we're going to jump right into our What's on Your Workbench roundtable here. And Eric, we're going to start with you since you're our guest of honor. So I'm sure, between running Elecraft and the run up to Hamvention, you probably don't have a whole lot of spare time. But in your little bit of spare time, what's on your workbench?
Well, gosh. Well, besides ham radio, I actually do get on the radio once in a while. I sneak on and surprise people. Been using my my iPad to run remote software. This is Marcus Rushkoff stuff that controls our K4s, and I'll be up at the kitchen table upstairs. My ham radio shack is down on the side of a hill, so I'm a hillside home, so down a couple levels, and so this way I can conveniently get on and work DX. Actually, with the same microphone I'm talking to you on right now, it plugs right into the iPad, so I use it for that too. And I've equalized the radio to match it and stuff. That's sort of cool. But outside of ham radio, one of my other hobbies. When you start a ham radio business, you're doing the business all day and also design and everything else we get involved here. I pretty much keep all the engineering teams on track and everything also. So and all the other fun stuff related to manufacturing. We have good people in each of those areas, but I get to be pulled in periodically on stuff and. The fire drill of the morning and the afternoon. And of course, there's always a fire drill in this business, it seems. But I'm also a private pilot. So I've been flying since 2005. And Mike, you're also a pilot, right? How long have you been flying for?
Oh, not long. I'm just over 250 hours. I started about 6 years ago.
Well, as you know, it's another addictive hobby, just like ham radio. So I'm an engineer, so I like debugging things. Unfortunately, I had to deal with airplane problems in the last month and a half. I got my plane stuck up in Petaluma, north of San Francisco. For those that are pilots out there, I have a variable pitch prop on a Cessna 182. Blades can rotate sort of like shifting gears, in a car. And there's an oil-filled hub inside. Obviously that can handle the mechanism that does that. And mine sprung a leak. And it wasn't apparent in flight. It was at least not getting the windshield covered with it. I saw a little moisture down at the bottom, thinking it was from fog that had just cleared in the area. But when I landed and I'm parking the plane and put the chocks on the wheels, I had a candy cane red stripes of dyed like transmission fluid running back over the top of the engine compartment on the top outside. And I have a white plane, so it looked like a candy cane. It didn't spiral, but it and then went up, misted the windshield, but nothing that was obvious when you were flying. But there was a thin mist on it. And then the exact same thing on the high wings above the cockpit, going all the way back. Wow. So I said, "Whoop, I'm grounded. We're not flying home today." I ended up staying overnight. It was on a Sunday. But where it got interesting is there were no mechanics, at least no shops open on the field on Sunday, obviously. So I had to stay overnight in Petaluma, Uber back over to the airfield. It's a nice single airstrip field, but it has a very nice service center. I think it's Mangan Air. These guys are Piper. This is not an ad. It's just their name of their service, but they were Piper Service Center, but also they're Cessna people too. So they certainly knew my plane. And we both concluded, yep, I'm grounded and we're going to have to take off the prop and send it up for overhaul, or at least inspection. And if they need overhaul, it had a number of years on it. So it was time for that.
Did you know right away it was the prop?
It's very easy. Nothing else has that color oil in it.
Oh, okay. Because any sort of oil, and you're thinking, I'm writing checks, big ones.
Yeah. No, this was, there's two, that's why it's dyed red. The front part of the hub, there's two manufacturers. This is more pilot techie probably than for a ham radio show, but they're Macaulay and Hartzell. Hartzell, I think, uses regular engine fluid all the way up through the full mechanics of the hub where the blades are. Macaulay has a separate section that they have this different fluid in there, and there's some historical reasons for it. But they're using stuff that's basically a red dyed lubricant fluid that catch cracks in the hub. And if you had them, they're not very common, but if you have one, you do not want that. Think about very heavy all aluminum blades spinning around at 2,700 RPM on takeoff. That's a lot of centrifugal, weight being pulled
Yeah.
against that hub. So it's a single machine piece of ignitive, aluminum and so on. Luckily, I didn't have any cracks or any problems, but I now have a overhauled blade. I won't tell you how many K4s that cost me, but an equivalent. It's more than one. Let's put it that way.
Oh, wow.
But I became an expert on airplane blades more so than I ever wanted to. Like most pilots, we pay attention to our planes, but very, very much so. And it's another fun way to not think about work. Actually, you're fully engrossed in the moment on that, which is sort of cool.
Well, okay. To make this kind of ham radio centric, do you ever operate while you're in the air?
Only as a passenger. I don't believe in distracted flying. But that said, I did do it going to Dayton one year, long before I was a pilot. I had the radio with me, and I had it set up to crossband between 146.52 and 446, and we were the repeater in the sky. That was sort of fun for people. But HF, no, I haven't done that from plane. I've had customers that run CW while they're cruising across the Central Valley of California. Now that's distracted flying. I'm sorry, there's no way I could do that. Yeah. But that said, I do have an APRS beacon. And if you're curious where I fly all the time, I probably shouldn't say this on the show, but if you look up my call sign on aprs.fi, you probably will find me with a dash number afterwards. I won't give the exact number out, but you'll figure it out real quickly. And that turns on automatically in the plane whenever you start the plane. So I always...
Can I share an antenna story, Eric?
Yeah, go ahead,
so
sir.
I had an old Piper 140, which great training thing. There's an antenna in the tail. It's for the... navigation system, and it's an inverted V, or it's a horizontal V for the ILS or whatever. Anyway, but it's not connected to anything, so I go over it one day with the rig expert, and I sweep it.
Yeah, it'll work on 2 meters, right?
And I was good enough on 2 meters because it's broadband. But I'd seen it, so there's nothing special in it. It's just there's a choke and 2 wires hanging. I ran a cable off that to a handheld. Worked great.
Yep. Yeah. No, I have it set so I can switch mostly that I have an auxiliary belly antenna. It's on the plane, so I can use that for my emergency. If my power goes down, I can't use the radios in the plane. I've always got a backup aviation handy-talkie, and I can plug my headset into that for noise cancellation and stuff, because it's hard to use it if you don't have noise canceling headphones on.
Yeah,
but
cool stuff. The Newark guys could use a handheld or two.
Oh yeah, I hear you. But anyway, that's sort of been my other hobby over time, is flying around all around the U.S. and some places point down south, down Baja and things like that. And it's every bit as engrossing as ham radio is. And so it's nice to have something to get away with it. Yeah.
Really quick aircraft question, and me not really knowing long about this. Is the controllable pitch the same as for your propeller? Is it the same as feathering? It's not quite the same.
Well, the blades are turning that in a similar fashion. You usually see feathering on turbine props.
Called turbine props.
Okay. I can change the overall pitch, and that's in terms of the angle it's biting the air at. And then you'll find, and the way we control it, we're basically, what we do is setting an RPM for it. There's a governor which uses oil pressure to. There's that. And I say governor, it's not a spinning weight or something. It's a bit of a feedback mechanism. So if you say I want to have the prop at 2,400 RPM, regardless of the engine power with the gas, we don't have a pedal. We have a rod we push in and out with a knob on it. As you increase your manifold pressure, which is how much power you're putting out with the engine, the blades will automatically adjust to whatever RPM you set it to. So if my cruise RPM is 2,400 RPM, it'll stay there, but it's biting it. By doing it that RPM, I can pick what the most efficient RPM is for if I want to have the best miles per gallon. I can have the one for the most power on takeoff, which is usually really high RPM. So it's at full in on the RPM control at full, 2,700 RPM is where the stops are. And so it's a way of adjusting if you want to call it, your efficiency of your prop as the way it goes through the air. And
kind of a transmission.
In a simple sense, yeah. But
no gearing ratios, but
except this one is it's maintaining the RPM, so it can figure that out, automatically. So it's not electric or anything; it's all mechanical and oil pressure driven off the engine. But
that's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool the way it works.
Size-wise, is the 182 similar in size to the 172?
It's big brother to it. They're very similar planes. The high wing Cessna, 4 seats, 2 in front, 2 in back. We have a lot more elbow room in a 182. In other words, you don't feel as cramped. At 172, I trained.
170's tight.
Yeah, 172s but they're great trainers because you can drop them from 5 feet off the ground and they bounce and they don't break, and which all students manage to do at least once when they're doing their first landing. But those of us have been through it, we know all about that. But 182s are very rugged too. They're sort of the SUV of the sky. You can load them up and go, though you have to do your weight and balance stuff, the usual measurements we do. But pretty cool stuff. It's another fun deal. Plus, they go nice and fast. And I've got a bigger engine in stock, just like ham radio. Bigger antennas. We go for bigger engines. Hot rod your plane.
That's where you don't go QRP.
Yeah, well, in airplanes, yeah. I tell people I do QRP through QRO. I even put Wayne on. I have an Alpha 87 amplifier once. This is just going sideways, ham radio wise. But we have back in the K2 days when we were first coming out with the 10-watt K2. And people could build. I think you can see one over my shoulder back there in the corner on that table. We still sell those after 26 years.
Wow.
And that's a solder every part and radio. So you can still do that, folks. You can, like Heathkit, you can build your HF radio. And I can pull that out and show it off later on, George. I didn't even think of doing that. But he came over to the house to operate off I have a Yagi at the house. So he came over. It's on the coast where I live in the Monterey Bay area, Central California, and it's still green here. We don't go brown because
you're close. Yeah, you're far enough north.
We got redwoods. We got redwoods and Monterey pines all the way to the ocean. So I'm a mile off the water and a little hill. But so Wayne came over and he's operating. But what I didn't tell him is I had the K2 going through my Alpha 87A. Wayne's a dedicated QRP guy, obviously.
Yes.
Though he does run 100 watts at home on occasion. Though he sort of steps back. He thinks that's real high power.
He has to take a shower afterwards.
He's like Thomas. He doesn't need an amplifier. So like when he would come to our field day, we'd be beating our head against the wall trying to make a contact, and Wayne would take like the KX1 and walk around and make a contact trailing a wire on the ground, and we're like, what the heck? He's such a good CW op that made us all look terrible. Hey,
did George, you ever told people how you met Wayne and myself originally?
I do, and so I do tell people the photograph on your website.
Yeah,
is the photograph I took of you guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all your fault.
Yeah, I believe the story involved wine, if I remember correctly.
Eventually,
yeah. But the first part is that we were located, probably less than half a mile, quarter mile apart, doing field day, and they were operating 100-watt stations and stuff, and we were scooting up right next to them on CW, about 4 or 5 kilohertz away, and their receivers were overloading, but we were having a good old time, didn't even know they were there.
And we're trying to figure out like what's going on, and we got the binoculars and we're looking around like, hey, I see a campsite. It looks like there's an antenna. Let's go over there. Who are these guys?
Yeah,
and
it was fun.
That was when the K2 was like brand new.
Oh yeah, that was new. Yeah,
what was it called? The 100 units that were like pre-order.
Oh, field test units. Units. Yeah, that was the 100 evangelical customers who went out and told the world about it. Because if you built it, it has to work better, right? So I was one of those 100. And the funny thing is, like, you'd appreciate this. And this is in the era where I was going to Japan a bunch for work. And so there's, I don't know how many, like 19 bloody toroids inside the K2. And so I'm sitting in the airplane with my little index card and like toroids taped to the index card, and I'd pluck one off and I'm winding 49 turns of number, 28 wire or whatever it was on the toroids, and the flight attendant walks by like, excuse me, but like, I'm just curious, what are you doing? So you don't want to say you're making a bomb or something.
I'm making a radio? Like, okay. And she just walks away.
Yeah, that would probably freak out some people these days.
That was clearly before 2000. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, the first field testers we shipped January of '99, so it was while we were all still innocent back then.
The first time I ever heard about Elecraft was one of the professors at my university was building. I can't remember if it was a K1 or a K2, but I remember him coming to the meeting and talking about it. His name is Clark Turner, W something something JPG. I remember his suffix because it's JPEG. And I'm trying to find him on QRZ right now, not having much luck. But
his middle name Savage, Clark Savage Turner or something. There was a name that stuck in my head, but
I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember him talking about these kits you could buy to make this actually incredibly well-performing radio, and I'm Sounds fun.
Yeah, we had fun doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Still do.
So that's what's on the workbench. Anything else, Eric?
No, I think I talked enough. I'll shut up.
No, okay.
Give it to somebody else.
Well, we'll come back to you in just a couple of minutes. So don't go anywhere.
But wait, there's more.
Wait. So Mark, as long as you're teed up here, what you got on the bench?
So I am playing with 3D printers right now more than anything else. Well, okay, actually that's not true. So I am working on a kit for some cosplay stuff that I'm doing. I have a little stuffed porg that you can buy at Disneyland. Y'all know that I'm huge into Star Wars and cosplay and role-playing and whatnot. And they have these little porg stuffies. Well, when you unstuff them, there's a whole lot of space inside to fit servos. And so I've been building this kind of skeleton of stuff, of hardware to stuff inside my porg to animate him. And while working on that, for the folks who are watching the video right now, there is, it's a circuit board that I have physically screwed these servos to. So I'm not using it as electrically, I'm using it as a structural element. And that's just incredibly ghetto, and it's what I happen to have on hand right now.
Does it actually flap the arms up and down?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Nice.
I mean, I could hook it up if we want to see it. It's an audio podcast.
Can we load those arms up, with a good auto tuner?
They're about the right size for about 1.2.
Oh yeah, nice. And they're doing the
shuffle.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Anyway, for those listening to the podcast right now, this is entirely,
Useless.
Anyway, point being that I was getting to the point where I'm like, okay, these circuit boards are not working anymore. I need to 3D print a body part, basically. And so I got my 3D printer out and finally set it up and tuned it up and various different things, and was chatting about it on the Discord channel or on the Ham Radio Workbench Discord. And a listener, Matt, N6AR or N3A, I'm terrible with call signs. Matt, you know who you are, said, I've got an Ender that I'm not using after upgrading to a different one. You want it? And I'm like, sure. And I know he lives just a few hours from me. So today, I literally drove down to Simi Valley to go pick up a free 3D printer. I have not set it up yet because I got home and ate dinner and started the show. But my justification for all of this is, we were talking a little bit before the shows about tariffs, and my plan in the past has always been to outsource my 3D printing to some other company. And I've used JLC PCB for my circuit boards, and so I used their 3D printing service for making some cases for one of my products, the KV4P stuff, and that worked out really well, and I didn't really see a reason to set up to do manufacturing here. Well, guess what? There are reasons now to set up to do that particular kind of manufacturing here. And so I don't think I'm going to go past 2 printers, at least not anytime soon. But I'm going to use these 2 printers and see how realistic it is for me to start manufacturing some of my own 3D printed parts.
What Ender model is that?
It's an Ender 3S1.
Okay. Yeah.
And then my other printer, the one that I've had for many years, is it's a Monoprice Maker Select Plus, which is the same thing as the Wanhao i3 Plus DI3 or Wanhao Duplicator i3 Plus. They're particular styles of 3D printers. They're bed slinger kinds, which means the bed is moving forward and back, and then the print head moves left and right and up and down. Kind of all of the new hotness is a Core XY, where the bed stays in one place and the print head moves in both X and Y, and then the bed just kind of moves down for the Z. And they have a better print quality and they're faster and blah, blah, blah. These are not those. And the fact that Matt went and got a Core XY is why he's not using his Ender anymore. And he's like, it's taking up space. You can have it for the low, low price of get it out of my garage. And, a tank of gas to get down to Simi Valley and back is a hell of a lot cheaper than buying a new printer. So buying a second printer anyway.
I would have sent you mine. I actually gave up mine probably a month and a half, 2 months ago. I donated it to our local radio museum. I had an Ender Pro 3, I think was the model I had. Okay. And I just found that I didn't need to use it that often. Plus, I have so many friends who have 3D printers that I can just outsource it to them.
Yeah.
And now I've got another. Yay.
And now you've got another.
And they're on it, and your friends are on it all the time, right? So
That's right.
Yeah, I actually do have a friend locally who uses his all the time, and he has a Ender, just not exactly like the one that I just got, but a very similar one. So I'll be leaning on him for optimizing this thing and getting it all tweaked out. There is one particular thing that I found before Matt offered up his printer that is available for the Enders, but does not explicitly list my monoprice printer, although it might work. And that is a 4-input multi-filament print head. So it's a print head with 4 different filaments coming into it, and then it can load and unload the different filaments, and you can have a whole lot of different colors available to you. And I don't need a whole lot of colors, but it would be very convenient to have multiple, like 1 or 2 colors to be able to do indications or markings on a print. But the other idea is there are filaments that are water soluble that you can use for supports. And instead of having to like break away all the supports, you can just soak it in water and they all dissolve.
Oh, that's
on
nice.
their own. My friend Nick, Exploding Lemur, he uses it where if he's printing in PLA, he'll put down a layer of PET G at the top of the support so that the PLA is resting on top of some PET G. And just having the different materials means that they don't merge, they don't glue into each other. And so removing the support material with that different layer of a different material in there makes removal a heck of a lot easier. So anyway, these are all the kinds of things that I'm thinking about with regards to 3D printers, and that's kind of what's been on my workbench, non-work related. Work-related stuff, I've been getting prepped for Hamvention. All of my stuff is boxed up and on their way to Hamvention. I dropped little air tags in each of the boxes, and so it's fun to watch them go across the country.
I've done that. Fun or stressful?
What's that?
It's stressful.
Yeah, actually, I put one in a box of. Can I talk about this, George?
Sure, go ahead.
I shipped out some Pactana stuff as well, and I dropped one in that box, and it hasn't moved. Or the last time it checked in was almost 24 hours ago.
I'm looking at it right now, and it's next to a Korean barbecue place, and I'm not sure if that's a good sign or a bad sign.
Decided to get some lunch. Yeah,
it's getting lunch.
It's in Chino, California.
Chino. That's the same one.
Right. I sent a radio back to the office once, and it sat in some guy's apartment building. It looked like overnight. But I think what happened is he put it in the truck because it was a drop-off place, and he was underneath. And finally, I went looking for it because I hadn't moved. And it was like but it's freaky. Yeah. It's better. You're better off not knowing.
No, I have one in my airplane in the back, for that obviously purpose, and I can see, hey, they just picked it up to do maintenance on it. And
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in Texas now.
Anything else?
How did it get down there? Yeah.
No.
Okay,
things are good.
Mike, how about you? What's on the bench?
Other than chainsawing, I guess I wasn't on the last show, so we'll talk about this. So we had this, I guess, 5 weeks ago, this ice storm, and some of it, like there was inch ice hanging off dipoles, and we're still cleaning up trees. Nowhere near as bad as Thomas, but if you're walking in an area where there's pine trees, there are, no matter where you go, there are branches on the ground that are trying to kill you, right? Because everything grabs your shoes, your ankles, your shoelaces, and my 40-meter wire beam. You can't even. I sent these guys the pictures. You can't even see where it is because it came down. And then all these pine boughs landed on top of it. They're about 6 or 8 inches thick, and it's so bad it's funny. But so a couple of weeks ago, I got things sort of stabilized. And I get the beam working again, and it was a stepper. I would have loved to have seen a picture of it fully loaded, but I'm sure
iced up.
All iced up, and but it recovered just fine.
They
So
used to
question
have
for you.
they used to have a picture like that on their website of one of them that was fully isolated.
Was it droopy with all the weight?
Yeah, it
Oh,
was fully
huge.
functional though. But, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I
But
would
it
think
was-
that even if it's all iced up, since the little tape thing runs through the tubing, it would probably work, wouldn't it?
And it probably was working right out to the point the power went out, and it was because it was in WPX. I was running a contest, and then so it's like 8 o'clock on Saturday, and I know this is going on, and I flip over to 80, and the 80 SWR is really weird. It's like high. Okay, well maybe that's just the ice, so maybe I can tune it out and do some cues, and then the internet went out, and then it came back up. And I went, okay, I'll operate a bit more. Maybe it's not that bad. And of course, it disappeared. When I get up there, I found out that the 90-foot tree that the V was in doesn't exist anymore. The whole thing came down. And of course, that's
Mike, you just need a bigger amplifier so you can have passive, heating from the antenna, melting the ice off.
Here in Canada, we can run 2250 PEP at the antenna.
Okay, that's
so
just
if you have 3 dB loss, you can crank it up.
Yeah, get a combiner. Maybe mount some
couple of
resistors in
combiners,
there and heat it up. It's like
and so I finally get everything stabilized. Okay, I'm sort of back on the air, and because I was playing with some DX Commander antenna, a Signature 12, which has got some interesting features. And so I get home and 6 is open. And I'll turn the beam, and the beam goes grinds to a halt. Okay, I'll go the other way. So it'll go like 30, 40 degrees, grinds to a halt. Now, I use a 403A rotor controller that has a flux gate sensor. So you stick it on the boom, and so it's always pointing the right way. It's not like the old school stuff. So
you don't have to calibrate your rotor.
No, and if you screw it up, everything's fine.
Yeah.
So 2 days later, I get up there. If there's not a tree leaning into the path of the beam. And it's a birch tree. And if you know about birch trees, they either are fine or they melt and just explode. And so I have to crank this tree, which is about 10 inches around at the bottom, back into a new vertical away from the tower. And it was always on my list to get rid of it, but I can't get rid of it without dropping the tower. It's not like I can run, there's just one set of guy wires, So anyway, I had to break out the come along and hook it up to another tree and big rope up about 12 feet. And if you've ever played with come alongs, it's like,
Yeah.
And over 3 days, I slowly cranked it to vertical. And then I started my chainsaw cuts and figuring it was just going to crack and let go. And all this works in a bushy area, so there's no real escape. If it starts to, it surprises you. And if you've worked in, as you've heard Thomas and I talk about, you always have an escape route, right?
You gotta have egress.
Yeah. Anyway, it was like 2 weeks, and then I guess it was last Sunday. It was out of the way, but I wanted to get rid of it, and I walk out to it, and instead of taking the chainsaw, I take the 12-inch, Swede saw, and I go into the back cut, and I literally must have gone 1/8 of an inch, and it cracked and fell over. It was that close.
In a way that did not do any damage?
Yeah, it was all good.
Oh, good.
But the tension on the come along and this 1-inch nylon rope we had, which was about 40 feet long, was, was C sharp, right? You could see.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Anyway, so that's pretty much just getting the station back in order, and the geometry's changed and new antennas, and I now need to go. I'm a big fan of DX Engineering's active antennas with the 6-foot whip on them. They actually work fairly well in an urban environment if you're trying to get rid of low band noise. And I also have the beverage, of course, was dead, so I got that back working. I think I mentioned before that I do have a beverage on ground, and it doesn't work very well because we got flooded too as a beverage underwater.
But it does. So, by the way, was the beverage on ground supposed to be a beverage on ground, or was it a beverage that had a problem?
Yeah,
okay.
That one was. Yeah.
It was intentional.
Yeah, that way you keep the deer out of them. They work fairly well, actually. Anyway, so I'll keep it short. That's
wow.
It's about 80% right now.
Okay, so Thomas, in the spirit of continuing chainsaw
stories.
How's things in Northern Carolina?
I don't think I have lifted a chainsaw in probably a week and a half or 2 weeks, which is almost a record since the storm. So I'm happy about that. I did, probably a little over 2 weeks ago, took down a couple of extra trees that we wanted to get down, and we've got some stuff that arborists need to do. So I could continue talking about chainsaws, but I won't do that. What I did this week, nothing on the bench per se, but I announced here on the show that I was doing a shack purge. I go through like once a year and try to get rid of things I don't want or need anymore. And I did a pretty scorched earth one this year in terms of how I handled like just the stuff that collects. That you don't want to let go of because you may need it one day, and I had this system where I've put it in boxes, labeled the boxes, have an inventory of the boxes, put it in the attic, and if I don't reach into those for like 18 months, then the boxes go away, sort of thing. And I also was looking at radios, and I tend not to get rid of radios unless I'm just not using them. And so I think it was a listener here on the show who contacted me and said, "Hey, Thomas, I hear you're cleaning out your shack. This is a long shot, but would you sell me your Venus SW3B, right? Which is a little three band CW only radio that's sort of a Venus's version, and these are made in China by Dale, I think his name is a ham radio operator there. It does really, really good work. And it's a very affordable, I think probably $185 $185 three-band radio, so 40, 30, 20. And it's pretty basic, but it works pretty well just for CW. Not a lot of controls or anything, but it works. And I've always liked it, and I had it in a pack a headrest pack. So it's a pack that was small enough that it Velcros to the back of your headrest. So it's a pouch that a lot of overlanders use. And I love it because it's a space in your car that you never use. And it's out of the way. It doesn't really show up much. People don't see it in the car. It's not sitting in the seat or something. And I've always liked using that. But I hadn't used it in probably over a year. And so I said, sure, I'll sell it to you. And so I thought to do it and to just test it and everything, I'd take it out for one last hurrah. So I did a POTA activation.
I think this is a big mistake.
Yeah,
it was. Continue.
I see I'm falling in love with this radio again.
I'm proud of myself this time. I took it out and it was really fun to use and everything. But I thought, I can let this one go. I've got I only have in that same genre of radio, right? I've only got two Mountain Topper MTR3B LCD models, and then I have the new MTR3B Currahee model, and then I have an MTR5B, so I have the 5-band Mountain Topper, and so I've got 4 of those. And I was like, I don't really need that. That's the reason I'm not using the Venus, is I've got those, and of course I've got a KH1 now too, and the KH1 is a radio that this company called Elecraft made last year, 2 years ago, actually. It's almost 2 years ago.
Has it been that long? Wow.
It's been a year and probably 4 or 5 months or something, but it's now in that class of radio that's not too much bigger than a pack of playing cards, smaller than a paperback book, really, really small radio. So I've got a lot of other options now. And so I had a really fun little activation. It was actually pretty active. We've had horrible band conditions at times lately, where I have friends that are traveling right now and trying to do parks on the air as they travel. And they're finding they had saved maybe an hour to stop at a park and then move on their way. But the conditions have been so rough that it took them over an hour and a half just to get the 10 contacts necessary to have a valid park activation, which I think a lot of people, I don't really care if I get a valid one or not, but it's usually pretty easily achievable. But when you're traveling and you're picking up a new park, you really want it to be activated then. So you're going to stay around, try to make it work. So I was really pleased when this one came together. I think in probably 12 minutes or less, I got my 10 contacts and made a few extra ones on 30 meters or no. I did it all in 20 meters that time. But anyway, I've sent it off today, took it to the post office in Black Mountain. It is on its merry way to its new owner. And I'm happy with that. The other thing I did this week, and I think it's the first time I've ever really done this, and that is I didn't wait around to start packing the radios I take with me to Hamvention, because when I go to Hamvention, and this has been since National Parks on the Air time back in 2016, I usually take radios with me, and I meet up with my buddy Eric, WD8RIF, stay at his house, his QTH one night, usually like the Tuesday night before Hamvention. And then we use that whole Wednesday to drive and go past parks. And I'm going to try to coerce him to go to like a little summit that I think's out that way too, on the way over to Xenia and Dayton, Ohio. And this year I started packing up the radios. And in the past 2, 3 years, I've started accumulating more and more people that go out on these POTA outings during Hamvention. It's like a bunch of friends and things that we just end up going out together. And so I think, well, I need to take radios that they can play with too. And so I started packing up radios in individual packs. I can just give somebody a pack and say, hey, this is a Pentec TR45L. Everything's in it that you need. And there's even a little T1 antenna tuner in there with the 40-meter infet half wave. So if you're using a non-resonant band, just use that one and go for it, go to town. But I started packing up these radios and I realized I had like 6 packs of radios. And I thought, this is crazy. Like, my car is going to cost so much money, like the contents of my car. I've got room in it because it's just going to be most of the time just me and my buddy Eric, because his son who goes along with us is actually going to be driving separately. And then another friend he's invited to come along, so we'll drive separately. So there's room for a lot of radios. And frankly, I pack lightly when it comes to like my clothes and things like that. But with radios, turns out I'll stuff a lot of radios in the car. And so
yeah, but you're going to need that space to put all the junk in the car that you're going to buy while you're at Hamvention. So it's not going up there. It's the coming back where you're going to take advantage of the space.
I actually have the cargo container on the car, on the roof of the car right now. I had to use it the other day when we evacuated or planned to evacuate in case the wildfire came up our way. And I thought, no, I'm just going to leave it on there and keep it there in case Eric wanted to buy something. The truth is, like, I don't think there was a time, probably the first decade or so of Hamventions I went to, starting probably around 2008, I would come back with quite a lot of stuff. Not necessarily like a car full of stuff, but unique things you could only find at Hamvention. Now that I've been doing that for so long, there are less and less unique things I want to bring home. So really, Hamvention for me, I love going to the flea market. And it's really fun hopping around there, and I'll find like 1 or 2 kind of oddball things I'll buy. But I don't usually take a cart full of stuff away from the flea market anymore. For me, what I really like about Hamvention is finding all the mom and pop companies that are making interesting products that I like, and checking out what some of the big manufacturers are releasing and that sort of thing. I just kind of enjoy that, and just seeing friends and that sort of thing. But anyway, so I've got, like, you'll be happy to know, Eric, that let me think. I'm taking the KX2, the KH1, the K1. And I put the KX1 back. I wanted to take it, but I thought, no, I'm going to limit this to like less than a half a dozen radios. And so I have the TR45L, and I think I'm taking a mountain topper with me, and I'm just going to limit it to 4 or 5 radios this time, which will be way, way, way more than I need. And even when I'm like, I'm charging my battery packs. I know it really isn't. But I'm charging my battery packs and stuff. And the really cool thing about the KX2 and especially the KH1, if you charge the battery in the KH1, you can run that thing forever. Like, you do not ever need to recharge it. I'm wondering if I'm still running on my original charge on the radio, because it just keeps going and going and going. It's basically, I mean, like, it's almost like 2/3 of the whole mass of the radio is the battery, right? So you can just operate this thing forever. So anyway, I don't stress too much about those things, but it's been really fun putting the packs together when I have other more important things I really should be doing.
Well, I would remind you that all of those radios are cheaper than a Cessna. So just put it in perspective.
And they don't leak oil either. I mean, you're all
They don't.
Not unless they get really old.
Yeah, old capacitors.
Elecraft's a mom and pop shop.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Pop and Pop.
Pop and pop.
Certainly was. Yeah, we've grown a little bit since those days, but there you go.
Anything else, Thomas?
That's pretty much what's on my workbench. How about you, George?
Okay, so let's continue the selling radio purge theme. You kind of got me on a roll. So I decided that I wanted to get the new Yaesu FTX1 just because it's the new thing. So I got to have one.
I would
Did
love
you get
to
it
chat
yet?
about that if we have time.
Oh yeah, we should. We
Yeah.
could talk for a few minutes here. So I put my $35 down when they first announced it, figuring, well, I probably won't get it, but just in case. Anyway, so just in case rolled around, and I decided to pull the trigger. Well, but to get the radio and all the stuff I want to get with it, I had to sell 3 radios to float the cost of this thing. So I sold 3 radios. They went pretty quick. They all went to good homes. So that's none of the ones you mentioned got sold off. So the Lab 599 got sold off. It went to a very good home, so I'm happy with that.
Excellent.
My FT 818 got sold off. I have no idea if it went to a good home or not. I hope so, but it got sold. And then my 857 got sold with a tuner and some other stuff I'd put together in a custom case.
It's about time you parted with those.
You know, that is a 20-plus-year-old radio, and you got to pour kerosene on the top and turn the crank, and it's that old.
But man, that thing worked really well on my way to Indiana and back.
The truth of the matter is, it's a really good radio for a lot of things. It's just kind of got an old receiver, but it's a pretty good radio. But anyway, so the reason why those went, they're actually all fine. But I never use them, like you were saying. There's ones that I just never use them. And so I sort of observe my pattern is I'll buy something because I think it looks really cool, and I'll try it out. And usually within a year or so, I'll figure out if it's a keeper or not. And if it's not a keeper, I'll hang on to it until I have to buy something else, and then I'll sell stuff. So I wind up keeping like half the stuff I buy, and I get rid of half of it. So those things are radios that, for one reason or another, I have other radios I'd rather use. So they all hit the trail. So FTX1 is on order. I got word that the radio will be available the first week of June, supposedly.
Really?
But no word on the accessories. So we shall see.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not getting mine nearly that. I did place an order too, but I got a message today, and it sounds like I'm a little further down the list, I think, which is fine. But yeah, I'm thinking mine's like August or something was when, if I read it correctly.
Yeah, so this one, I'm sure all the dealers are the same. They all have a big list of people who put in the reservation. They're just going through the chronological list. So Mark, while we're on the topic, before I talk about the last thing on my bench, what do you want to say about the FTX one?
So, for those who don't know, and this is not an ad, they don't pay us for this, but we, the hosts, had a really interesting text thread on this radio when it was first announced. The FTX1 is a QRP handheld radio, very similar in concept to like the 705, all mode, all band, HF, VHF, and UHF. About 5 to 10 watts out, depending on what power supply you use. It's Yaesu. It's got roughly the feature of the FTDX10, if I remember correctly.
Well, it's got the ADC and the and the size of an FPGA that's the same, but we don't know what the rest of the radio is. Okay, close to it or not. But
it's morally kind of similar to that thing, but it's a handheld QRP radio, right? But it also has this base that you can drop it into. That is a 100-watt amplifier that turns it into a 100-watt mobile rig on HF, and then I think 50 watts on VHF and UHF. And yes, you can get a portable QRP radio and hook it up to a 100-watt amplifier and accomplish roughly the same thing, but the tight integration on this one makes it really nice, and the fact that the amplifier also works on VHF and UHF. And I hear beeping.
Continue.
That's me.
Okay.
Take my drugs.
So it looks like a nice radio in that regard. What I want to do with it, and I don't know yet whether this is going to be feasible or not, I want to put that 100-watt amp in the trunk of my car, permanently wire it to the car with its own local battery like I do with all of my ham radios, wire in a speaker to my car, wire in a remote hand mic up to the front of the car, and, permanent antennas, and do all the things that you would do with a mobile HF rig, and then put the QRP body of the radio up on my dashboard as if it were a remote head, right? So in my car, it works like a 100-watt HF mobile radio with the display up on the dashboard and the audio, the hand mic and the speaker all kind of wired into the car. But when I get to my park or to wherever I want to go, I can just reach in, grab the head off the dashboard, disconnect its cables, and now I've got that same radio in a portable form factor that I can take out to the park bench and do whatever I want with or whatever, right? Like that workflow is super appealing to me. We do have the bad news that Yaesu does not plan on making a remote head kit for it. At least that's the last I heard. I saw somebody post that into our text thread. I don't remember who that was.
Well, there's no separation kit announced now, and there's nothing in the documentation that indicates how the head radio talks to the PA tuner.
But if you look at, go ahead.
Well, because if you look at how they connect together, there's BNC connectors in the back of the head, so it's probably the case that they made some kind of like opposite gender BNC socket, so they just kind of friction fit stuff in. I don't know how else you would do it. Yeah. But what's missing for me is how does the radio talk to the amp? What's the control audio connection? Because there's no extra connector and there's no pogo pins that are in the documentation, but they could be there and we just don't know because it's not that detailed and there's no photos. There's photographs of the back of the radio, but not the front of the amp to show how that connection would be made.
So from what I've been able to tell with the few photos I have seen is it does look like it's a integrated big funky connector in the body of the amp. But the connectors on the back of the head, they look like the BNCs like you were talking about. I see a couple of 3.5 millimeters and one that is sized as if it's a mini DIN.
Well, yeah, it is a mini DIN.
It is a mini DIN.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go on the assumption that the connection, the built-in cable on the body of the amplifier breaks out into two BNCs, two 3.5 millimeters, and a mini DIN, right? I can make extension cables for all of those. I am not afraid of running LMR 240 Ultraflex from the front of my car to the trunk of my car, right? Like that is something where a little bit of ingenuity can make a remote head for that. And that possibility kind of excites me.
Yeah, I think if they're smart, they would do something like what you described, but with some kind of high density connector or a digital communication channel of some form or another to make that work. But looking at the back of the radio, I mean, it's actually in the manual for the radio itself. So what's on the back of the radio, so we don't have to really speculate too much, is two BNC connectors. There's a mini DIN, which is for the tuner/amplifier. There's a DC power jack. And I think there's only one other connector. And I'm not sure what that... It's a circular connector, and I'm not sure...
So I was not aware that the manual had come out.
Yeah, it just got published like yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, it is a external speaker jack. So there is this is why it's a mystery to me. So looking on page, what is it? Like page 15 of the manual, it shows you all the connectors in the back of the radio module. Two BNCs. Huh?
Bet you 8 days from now you'll have a better idea.
Oh yes, probably. 8 days from now I'll have a much better idea. So anyway, there is no. I mean, the only I don't know
the
what
tuner, the tuner linear. How is that not the cable?
But the tuner. Well, look at the pinout of the tuner linear jack. It's like transmit. It's like audio. 13 volts, transmit, inhibit. I mean, there's no like data. It's not like I2C.
It's early.
Or something.
Who needs it?
It's early.
Well, so you have to be able to talk to the amp, unless the amp is dumb. I mean, the amp could just you could make the amp in the tuner dumb and just takes RF in and goes, okay, I'm going to amplify the RF and I'm going to tune the tuner based on the RF sampling. You could certainly do that, and if they did that, then you could do what you're describing without a control cable.
Well, if you look right below it in the manual, okay, so we're looking at page, like you said, page 15 in the manual. Number 6, the tuner linear connector. Yeah, it's got a bunch of things, but the band data, it does have the ability to specify what band it's on, not the exact frequency, but at least signal what band.
Well, but if they just built it like a KXPA 100, you don't even need that. The KXPA 100 works beautifully fine with any radio plugged into it, because it just sniffs the RF, amplifies it, and tunes it. I mean, it doesn't need any of that nonsense. I mean, it's helpful to have the send command, pin to tell it it's in transmit, but aside from that, it doesn't need anything else.
Rear panel of the main body Optima. Okay, so yeah, they're
So anyway, we're speculating about how this thing's going to work, and if it is what I just described, then you could remote it. But they don't talk about that, which is kind of weird. But then Yaesu's not very good at marketing, so.
I don't know. I feel Yaesu.
It's really, they're not.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get this thing because I think it's a cool design, and we'll kind of see how it goes. I did not get rid of my 705 because I love my 705. I did not get rid of my. Let me list the Elecraft radios for your benefit, Eric. My KH1, my KX2, my KX3. None of those got sold. They're not going anywhere. My KXPA 100 is not going anywhere. They're going to bury that thing with me because I sold one once and I regretted it. So I fixed that. And so I'm really curious. Like, I think the integration as a system is going to be very nice. I think the user experience, I hope, will probably be really good on sideband and probably decent on digital and acceptable on CW. In my personal experience, what I found is like even the 705, which I really love, it's a great radio, and I've used it a lot on CW. But the KX3 is better on CW. It just is. I mean, So I'm sucking up to our guest here a little bit, but seriously, like a buddy of mine just was buying a new HF radio, and he's a CW operator, and he said, what should I get? And I said, well, it depends on what you want to optimize for, because there's so many radios that are like above the line of acceptability, and like they're all good. Right? There's almost no radio you can buy today where you'd say, well, that's a terrible radio.
No, they're all good.
Not
today.
from one of the big manufacturers.
For given price range, they're all good, right? So it's just like, well, do you really want to, like the 705 is an awesome QRP radio for digital stuff.
Yeah.
It just, it's easy to hook up to, you get the audio scope, it's great. But it's okay for CW. Like the KX3 is kind of a pain in the neck on digital. You can make it work, but you got more junk to deal with, but it's great on CW. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. So, you're kind of getting down to the 2% differential of like, what do you want to optimize for? So I'm excited to get it. Anyway, we'll see how when it shows up. I'm sure we'll talk about it until nobody wants to listen about it anymore.
Yeah. I am very excited to hear your experience with it.
Yeah, and I'm a little disappointed that my order is going to take until August to get here. But anyway, according to their expected ship date. But I order a lot of things mainly because I do check out and review QRP radios. So this is the latest one. Yaesu hasn't had one out for over 2 decades, a new one. Besides, if you call the 818, I guess it was just an iteration of the 817.
Not a new one.
And so I'm really curious about it. I'm curious what they'll do with it. And I have to say that, like, at first blush, I'm really, I think it's really cool what they've done with some of the modular build that they've done with this, where you can attach things to it and you kind of push their whole radio together and turn it into what you want it to be. I did end up getting the Optima model with the PA mainly because it was not that much more to get it over the field head unit.
Yeah.
And it has an ATU in it, probably not a wide ranging ATU, but an ATU.
It's 3-to-1. That is in the manual. Yeah.
Is it? Okay. I haven't read that.
So it's no 10-to-1 tuner. Ain't no Elecraft tuner. Let's get that on the table right now.
Yeah. It's more of one just for you can put a really decent random wire antenna with a good transformer on it, and it can probably handle that, but that's about it. But at the end of the day, like, there's this part of me that thinks like it actually isn't a radio for me. It's not the kind of radio I operate normally. The head unit on it, I'd have to see what the form factor is like in my hand, but the 705 is a wonderful radio in a lot of respects, but I rarely take it to the field. I think it's a good one. I probably won't let go of it anytime soon, but it's just not. I just don't take it to the field a whole lot.
This is why when people say what radio would you recommend, it's kind of a dangerous question, because
it is.
The kind of radios that you really like, I find irritating. You know, like I like
No punches pulled.
this. Well, I'll tell you why. I mean, in all seriousness, like the 705, the KX3, the KX2, they're very comfortable radios to use. You turn them on, they sound great, they work great, no muss, no fuss. You know, it's like everything is there. It's just kind of a smaller form factor of a really, nice big radio. And a lot of these these minimalist well, maybe that's the category. These minimalist QRP radios, like the Mountain Toppers, the audio is kind of cheesy and the tuning's a pain in the neck, and it's like kind of.
There's no perfect radio, George.
Yeah, but so this is why like Mike, I'm sure maybe you're somewhere in between, right?
I mean, Eric, I don't know how many customer calls you take, more than you probably have time for, but it's like, what do you do? What do you operate? What's important to you? Are you blind? Do you want big letters? Do you want little letters? It's and you two are a great example. You're the opposite end of the spectrum. It's great. It really is.
So that's what's on my bench, except one other thing. So I got a new product that showed up in the nick of time from China before the tariffs hit. And it's a two position VHF UHF coaxial relay, a remote controllable one. So the board showed up. They fit the chassis box first time, hallelujah. And so then I ported the core firmware over to it. So now it's all working on the station controller. So that's great. So that's working. So I was.
Did you order 100?
I didn't. I only ordered like 30. Which is a mistake.
I don't need so it's okay.
I had the RF relay, so I'm having them fab the board with the microcontroller and everything, but not the RF relay or the connectors, or the chassis, because I already had chassis. So so I should have made like 100, but I didn't. I did make a whole big pile of GPIO control modules, and those are the ones that got tariffed. And it was a shock. It was a $1,800 order with a $2,700 tariff. So my $1,800 thing cost me $4,500.
I feel like I said before, I think I can share this. I heard this morning we use really high quality knobs on our product because ham hoppers really the encoder's got to be right.
Yeah, it's gotta be a really good one.
Yeah. It's got to be anyway. $30 tariff on top of one knob.
Wow. Yeah.
What a lot of people
you can't just absorb that on a $1,500 item.
No. I think the big trick here, I think, is making a product. Do you go, well, I'm going to keep the same margin on my product. I'm just going to add the tariff to it and pass on the tariff.
That doesn't work out once you start getting on all your parts, because your margins go to, you have to carry the inventory. You've got to pay for all the overhead on that. Your inventory just got a lot more expensive. In other words, you're tying up more cash.
So what do you do?
Raise the price.
You tie up more cash.
Yeah.
You tie up more cash, and you end up raising prices also, which is painful because that affects sales no matter what you do. So no
matter what, everybody
you don't want to sell at a loss either. So that's a problem.
I don't know. Your employees want to get paid. They want to put their kids through college, right? Sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the other problem. If you get into inflation and stuff, but that makes everything more expensive from that side too. So we all have to eat.
Yeah. Boy. So the sad part about all this is the answer is, well, just make it here in the good old US of A, which of course, that doesn't work in this world.
Unfortunately, if you buy from, both we and our competitors over here buy from a lot of U.S. suppliers, certainly, but a lot of the material or assemblies that they buy to sell to us are made offshore, and they aren't made in the States anymore. And that's I mean, literally, I can't find somebody to make some of that. That's the way it is. We get sheet metal fabricated here, but of course, the metal comes from all around the world.
Yeah, I was just going to mention
PCB fabs. I went looking for a PCB fab in the U.S. and all the PCB fabs are still more expensive than JLC, even with the tariffs.
Yeah. So we can only hope that this is a self-inflicted problem that we uninflict from ourselves.
3.5 more years.
Hope so soon.
So let's hope for that. So on that happy note, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to dive into remote operating and a bit about what Elecraft is up to. So we'll be right back.
I'll take a quick break.
Why don't you just, okay, why don't we just record a quick minute and I'll just edit it in so it flows, so it's not part of this second half.
Okay.
Okay. So go ahead and say whatever you want to say.
I found the call sign. It is WA3JPG, and I want to apologize to Hadassah. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. I was not aware that Clark is now a dead name. So WA3JPG, Hadassah Sobel. She currently lists her KX3 on her QRZ page, and I'm pretty sure it was the K2 that she was building when I knew her back in university. So yeah, very cool kit.
All right, good. Well, that will stick out like a sore thumb in the middle of the edit. So I'll just pop it in there. It'll be nice and smooth. Well, by the miracle of modern electronics and networking, we have a fourth. Oop, we don't have a fourth. Shit.
That's good.
All right, let's try that again. Well, by the miracle of modern electronics, we now have another guest. Hello, Vince.
Hi, George.
How are you?
I am absolutely wonderful. And you?
I'm just doing great. So for those of you listening who are wondering what's going on, so Vince wasn't able to make the first part of the show, but he's joined us now as we dive into Elecraft and remote operating. Vince, before we do that, do you want to share anything special about what's on the bench or what you've been up to?
Oh, man, I have been learning all of the joys of being a made in Canada exporter, selling my goods into the United States this week. And what I have learned is if I spend more than 50% of my time transforming a bag of parts into a Morse tutor kit or a VK3IL paddle, that I stamp a made in Canada label on it and y'all don't have any import problems. But if I sell you those same parts for only slightly less, I have to bag them individually by country and declare them by country as electronics parts, and y'all probably have a tariff coming your way if I sell it to you. So out of pure frustration, and as we're recording the show, it's just days before Hamvention, I've taken my store offline, talked to my partner about it. We've taken it offline to say, hey, come talk to us after Hamvention on May the 30th. We need a holiday. But there's the story behind why we need the holiday, because I had 8 packages refused by my broker, who opened 6 of them up and said, yeah, y'all aren't compliant with the new rules that just came in yesterday.
Oh,
that's the ever-changing world we live in. So, but Staples, the Canadian Office Depot, is my friend. They had made in Canada stickers made up in a sheet, ready to go. So anyway, that's just one of the stories from the past week.
Boy, what a pain! Well, let's hope if someone's listening to this in the future, they'll think like, "What are they talking about?" And this will be well behind us.
By the time this drops, it'll be changed again.
Well, no doubt.
And that's the frustrating thing. So, anyway, that's just the fun of being a guy putting some kits together in Canada.
Well, so with that in mind, let's jump into Eric. Let's talk a little bit about Elecraft. So before we talk about remote operating, what is new and exciting in the world of Elecraft?
Oh, gosh. Well, we've got a lot of things going on. I mean, some of it's not brand new. Obviously, we're going to talk about remote operations, so I won't go into too much detail here, but we're always about pushing the envelope on things, and we've been pushing the envelope on the K4. We've got a board that actually turns it into a K4 HD, we call it, that basically takes your blocking dynamic range. And I think I got one of those laying around here. This is half of it. There's also an A to D card. We call it a DDC, but you can see some filters on there and dual synthesizers on the back here. These 2 little guys there. Those are SI570s like we used in the K3S. And this takes your blocking dynamic range up to over 140 to 145 dB above noise floor, which is huge.
Hey, bro.
And
so now for a regular person that doesn't understand what any of that means, so what they understand is I'm going to pay money and get something to put in my radio.
Yeah.
What are the circumstances under which I would appreciate what that does?
Well, blocking dynamic range, people on VHF will recognize this when you're operating repeaters and you pull up next to your buddy who's talking to the same repeater, and all of a sudden your receiver goes deaf, like really deaf, because they're 5 feet away from you. They're not transmitting the same frequency, like on 2 meters or in the US, 600 kilohertz away. And you go, what happened? Well, that's desense, we call it there. That's being blocked. And what happens is you're overloading usually the front end amplifiers, or it could be any number of amplifiers in the receive chain. They're basically clipping. And when that happens, the effective sensitivity of the radio just goes isn't good. It is gone. And so until they stop, get further away from you, and the problem goes away. So the trick is to have a radio that's strong enough to handle that blocking. And with direct sampling radios, of course, we're using very high dynamic range A to D converters, and you can get pretty good, darn good blocking dynamic range, certainly up in the high 120s or even the 130s, 130 dB above the noise floor. That's how we do it. We take a signal generator and you crank it up, above where your noise floor is, and you keep going until it reduces the signal you're listening to by, say a dB or so. And that's just the measurement limit, but obviously you can probably go a little further before it wiped out totally the signal. But you can get strong signals like that. On HF, it can be a neighbor down the street that is operating. This is not intermodulation, which you hear about like from the Sherwood charts in the right-hand column that everybody looks at. That's multiple signals creating intermods, just like you used to get intermods on your poorly designed 2-meter receiver or something, FM receiver in the days. Like in Silicon Valley, we used to have a building at Highway 280 and Highway, 17 or whatever it is now, or 880, that had a bunch of paging transmitters on it. Whenever you drove by or whatever repeater you're listening to, you heard like 5 or 10 conversations at once from the paging transmitters, because they were mixing together and adding and subtracting their frequencies. And eventually something came out on the frequency you're listening to, because your front end, say, preamplifier in your 2-meter radio became a mixer because it was clipping and getting overloaded. So multiple signals in that case. And that actually takes less signal to cause third order IMD than blocking does to block something. So it takes a real strong signal to block. Say your neighbor down the street that's running a kilowatt and 160 meters with a vertical wire. You can't do much about them. So, and you want to operate in the same band, you're going to have a problem. So it's any radio pretty much. And the K3 was sort of the top of the heap in that area. We wanted to make sure we kept that performance. So as part of the K4D, that goes in. This is all working and tested and done. As a matter of fact, it's going into production now. So that's a real deal. And that we'll be talking more about it with delivery dates at the show and stuff. So that'll be pretty cool.
So I would think that the other situations where that would be super useful would be like at field day, where you've got a whole bunch of transmitters. And like at our field day, for instance, we have enough stations so you can kind of be on each station on its own band, but you really want a CW and a sideband station on 20.
Yep.
And it's just like,
you can't get your antennas far enough apart from each other or you're running verticals instead of Yagis where you can be side to side or dipoles side to side. No, it's a huge thing. So it helps a lot. I mean, again, the existing SDRs do pretty darn well on field day. We've had really good success, certainly us and our company, Inflex and the other guys. We've all done that. And so the radios they work reasonably well. But the extreme cases are, say you've got data, CW, and sideband and stuff. Of course, you don't want to have somebody on a mobile HF, little tiny mobile radio that has poor phase noise. You can't block that because that's them transmitting garbage. You can't stop that. But certainly just getting overloaded by a single signal is a big deal. And doesn't, you don't have to have a bunch of guys operating on the band at once or anything for this to happen. And if you've got a buddy on a mountaintop above you or anything, that you have to beam through to get to Europe, say from here on the West Coast, you appreciate it right away. So we've already been taking pre-orders in terms of not taking the money, but just basically having people sign up for it. And it already is overloading what I expected. So I had to increase my orders for stuff. So that's a nice problem to have. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
So in the K4 line, there's 3 versions, right? Mm-hmm. So could you briefly describe what the 3 is and where does this one slot in?
Well, this is the highest. It's the highest performance. Everything's upgradable in our product lines, and it's just true for a lot of our radios. Even when we improve radios, a lot of times we'll make some of those improvements available for the prior, version of the radio, like on the K3 versus the K3S. For those of you that are familiar with those radios, when we improved the main oscillator in the radio, the local oscillator, and got what we call phase noise. If you look on a spectral plot, we just quieted it down once you get away from the carrier, and that makes a huge difference on receive and transmit. It's important both ways. It can be quieter, in terms of picking up other signals and stuff. And we could sell that. You could take a K3 and upgrade it to a K3S. Well, in the case of the radios here, we go from a K4, which has one single A to D converter off of one antenna path. It's a 16-bit high-speed, fire-breathing analog devices, A to D, digital down converter, and all that on a single card. And but we have room for more cards in the radio. So say you want to run diversity, or we want to have listening optimized on 2 different bands with 2 different antennas. Well, you need 2 different A to D converters for that if you think about that. So because you're not going to be able to do either diversity reception where you're trying to listen So two antennas on the same band, and maybe one's higher than the other or spaced out. And the bands are opening or closing, say on 80 meters or 40 meters. And the band's fading up and down, but it doesn't always do it the same on the two different antennas, or on your beverage mic versus your transmit antenna or something like that. So the K4D adds a second A to D converter, so it just plugs in another slot inside the radio. We add second band pass filters in front of that we can kick in for protecting your band from a person on a different band. That's always in the radios for each of the receive paths. So that's, you can upgrade from a K4 to a K4D that way. And actually K4D probably is our most popular, certainly product today. And it's amazing how many people come back. I watch how many of them upgrade their K4s and stuff. Or people will buy a K4 off a guy because he maybe bought a K4D and then they upgrade it, so it all works out in the long run. We really, in the K3 days, you could buy everything even more so optioned than we can do in a K4 with extra options. And people would buy their very stripped down radio and buy all the pieces later. So it was good for us either way. We didn't worry which way they bought it. So getting back to the different K4s. So you got the K4 with 180D converter, and that gives you a single antenna path. You can listen on multiple frequencies, two receivers. That's all, the 80 is fast enough and broadband enough to listen to two bands at the same time. If you've got a multi-band antenna coming through the receive antenna ports, so the low pass transmit filters aren't in line because they'll limit one of those two bands if they're above the other one. But if you have two antenna paths that you want to have fully independent, maybe you want to listen to 6 meters while you're down on the 10-meter net, and talking, or vice versa or something like that. That's the K4D. So the next thing is how do we get the next level of performance out of the radio? Well, we basically have a super het front end that we can switch in front. And you can turn on and off like a noise blanker. And it can be a function key you define on the touch screen or one of the buttons on the radio. And you don't have, it's like like a noise blanker that you're just using when you need it, when you have something that got really, on field day and you happen to say, gee, they put that vertical guy on 40 meters next to my CW station on 40. And I'm going to need to do something to block that out. Sort of like when you and I first met on field day back in 1999, I think it was, or something. And the K2 was doing really well next to you guys. And same thing. It had a clean receiver and not anything close to what any of us have these days. It's gotten a lot better, but it was, for the time, it was a very good blocking performance also on it. So the K4 HD adds that with two receiver paths, so you don't lose diversity. And we had to develop special crystal filters, because once you optimize everything in the receive path of a radio to handle these much higher single signal levels that you could have in these extreme cases, and call it the field day or the de-expedition on a beach with verticals situation. Both those cases, you're going to, you're not able to isolate the antennas from each other as well, unless you have a lot of space, say on the island. But this solves that problem for that, which is nice. So, and also it covers it again for all of us have all sorts of weird things that happen that we never expected. I have a guy that moved in 6 blocks from me that runs FT8 at a kilowatt all the time on 20 meters. I'm sure glad I've got, certainly the K4 handles that. So it's better than what a lot of the stuff we had in 1999 was. So.
I know one of those guys.
Well, I actually, as a side, by the way, our amplifiers, all have a, the microprocessor controlled. So we log what's going on with them all the time, what frequency they were on, if there was a fault, that kind of stuff, how much power, what the currents were, and then if one comes in because it's not quite working, when I see somebody on the FT8 frequency at 1800 watts, I go, I think I know what happened here. Hams have a fine way of stressing their systems, which is, we've all blown a few things up in our time, but so in the case of this thing, we're making it easier for people to deal with those situations where, say you live in Silicon Valley in our area, not where I am, but over the hills from us, we're on the coast, but there's a lot of hams in close proximity there. That helps them a lot. But also it helps people even out in the countryside, because sometimes you'll have somebody that's got a remote station on a mountain peak or something. We get remotes, and you're seeing a lot of those out there now, and they fire up with their kilowatt, and you go, well, gosh, now I can't hear on 20 meters when I'm on sideband when they're running CWRB or FT8 or that kind of stuff. So this helps that a lot. And I don't, basically it's the state of the art of what we can barely measure. Actually, interesting problem we run into. We're using very low phase noise and actually older HP signal generators to get something clean enough where we can do close in dynamic range measurements for blocking dynamic range, because there you have to crank up the signal so loud that any noise coming off the signal generator, that's the side, think of it as sideband noise. It's just noise that's going away from its carrier. And the HP 8640s, which are this old industry standard for a super clean signal generator, even they can generate enough. You have to go through extreme things to measure something above 140 dB. We can measure about 145. And if you're exceeding that range, I think we're in good enough shape that no one's going to complain about what we're doing. So that we pushed the envelope pretty hard on that. So that's worked out real well. So, and sometimes just want to have every option they can get in the radio, just like, interesting thing I heard, I didn't ever think about it this way, but people look at resale value in the radios eventually, because some people buy and then they just for fun, like you were getting your Yaesu radio, you'd say, hey, this is cool, I'm going to play with it. It may keep, it may not, and it keeps resale value up. So I think inflation's done a good job of that too lately. If you look at where the radios that people bought 8 years ago, they're selling more than what they paid them for.
I know what it's worth. It's got the original packaging, all that stuff.
Oh
too.
yeah, no, I have guys that still have unbuilt K2s. Oh, I forgot. I was going to show you that earlier, George. I've got.
Oh, what you got?
Remember, we introduced this in 1999. That was the K2, right?
Oh, sure.
This little radio. And people not everybody who hasn't been around in ham radio long enough. Every single part in that board, the customer had to solder in. Yeah. So, and there's little board modules, a sideband module with filters, a noise.
That looks like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah, it is. Well, if you like to solder, this is the where else can you get? It's like people like to build airplanes for a hobby, and of course they spend years doing that. But.
So I got to tell you, this is sort of going back a little ways here. So when you guys came out with the K2, there were a couple things about that radio that impressed me quite a bit. The thought that went into it. So I'll give you two examples. Thing number one, very simple. The tuner used latching relays. Well, today, most tuners, QRP tuners, use latching relays. You were the first guys I saw that did that. And when I saw that, I thought, well, of course, that is exactly how you should do it. Because here you are running QRP, and you've got every little, milliamp matters.
Yeah.
And then you have this tuner where it's just sucking juice for no good reason to energize the relays. But the Elecraft tuner was all latching relays. I thought, oh man, I think these guys really get it. This is really clever.
Yeah.
The other thing that it was really great in building the K2, when you would go to assemble a module and plug it together, and then the quote test equipment unquote was built into the front panel. So you could literally take a wire and a pin and make a little voltmeter and probe a point inside the radio to measure something. And that was all part of the radio itself.
It was also self-preservation too, because, when you build a kit, you're terrified what's going to happen when they don't get built right. And we have a wide range of builders, believe me, we've seen it in terms of soldering skills or lack thereof. And in terms of
solderoids.
Yeah, we had a on our website. We had we've been around 20. This is 26-year-old design, by the way, that we're still selling. It's still competitive. It's interesting to see how well that little one does. And it's the only HF radio you can build at this quality level, and sideband CW with it and full break-in, diode switch break-in and stuff. Which, by the way, came from me having an Alpha 87A amplifier, so that helped a QRP radio because they were diode switched. I like that so much. But I lost my train of thought.
Well, I was talking about the built-in test equipment. And
I was going to say two things. One, that means it's easier for them to test the radio. So obviously I didn't have a large number of tech support engineers. I was actually doing that part in addition to everything else like Wayne and I were doing at that time, literally almost out of our base, just barely out of our basements. And the other thing is I used to always advertise it as, you always, back in the Heathkit days, for those of you that built radios or done other projects, we had the proverbial smoke test, when you first power it on. Well, we just say we give you incremental smoke with the K2 because you get smaller amounts of smoke that you could usually figure out where it died if you did do something wrong. And that to this day is proved out. I mean, we really don't get a lot of them coming back.
Well, that also ties to the third thing, which is the quality of the documentation.
Oh, sure, yeah,
spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, because when people think about Heathkit, aside from the nostalgia and all that, if you said, well, what was great about Heathkit, one of the things is you'd say, well, the manuals were amazing because it showed you exactly step by step how to do the assembly, and the Elecraft manuals likewise were really excellent in walking you through the assembly. And also included the schematics and the theory of operation and all that. You can read as much of that as you want, or just build it.
Yep.
And so the building was, I'm sure you said it's kind of self-preservation, and I appreciate that, but a lot of companies would be like, it takes a lot of time and effort to make something for the customer to assemble and make it as foolproof as possible, even though it's in your self-interest for them to do that. But still, it takes effort, and it also takes the smarts to know how to do that. I mean, I think I would guess here a little bit, but I bet Wayne was a big part of figuring out how to
Wayne
convey
is
that.
absolutely, the latching relays were his idea. I mean, Wayne was, I met Wayne because I actually had built one of his designs and before we met, even in the NorCal 40, and then I started modifying it and publishing in the QRP whatever it was, not quarterly, the one of the journals for that. I wasn't a QRP operator normally, but I thought this would be fun to build because I was busy running another business, tech business, that I wasn't getting a chance to do as much building anymore, engineering. I was just doing the business stuff. And I love to design stuff. So I started hacking that and making it so you could run split and work DX, and had a lot of fun on 40 meters working in over 100 countries on it. It was sort of amazing you could do that. And I was sort of hooked on the QRP thing for a while. That was sort of neat. I still do that. But anyway, he had done a great job with that, and he's a very elegant designer in terms of how he looks at stuff. He's very minimalist in a lot of ways in terms of not wanting to waste energy, in terms of battery current and stuff, but also trying to get reasonably good performance out of it. Though I'm an old analog design and digital and software kind of guy, sort of do all that stuff. And I, having done a lot of instrumentation and test instrumentation, I understood the low noise stuff even back then. So, and also dynamic range, and that was not stuff on the table when we first came up with the K2. It was I know we're getting far away from remote here, but the K2 was basically designed not necessarily to be a high performance radio, more to be just a really good kit radio, like you said, with a good manual. And Wayne wrote that manual, by the way. I took the pictures on an old 3 megapixel Olympus camera, which we thought was a hot camera back in those days. And it was, I mean, it worked out fine for that manual. But he's a really good writer too. And
like I say, I have a K210 here that I still use today in the field, and it's a wonderful radio, and it really holds its own.
Yeah.
And you said that you didn't set out to make it a high performance radio, but I recall I was licensed in '97.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was really searching for like my first good HF radio, my friends were saying, like, if you can afford a K2, that's where you need to go, And I really do. I think it's kind of a neat radio today too, because you think a lot about. You guys do a pretty good job of keeping stock of parts. Things go obsolete and things like that. Of course, there's some parts you can't really control, but you keep a really healthy supply of parts. And it's one of the radios that you can open up, and it's easy to repair, and that there's like an ultimate amount of documentation in there. You can find what's going wrong. You can test it. You can fix it.
Yeah.
And then usually you guys even help. Like even sometimes even with the older radios, there's someone there who can help you.
Yeah, you can actually talk to a human being about that. That's sort of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we planned on that. The performance actually is interesting. We got the first prototype working in I had my basement, and we live about 60 miles apart from each other, 55 miles apart. And he's over in the Bay Area. I'm in a Silicon Valley escapee over on Monterey Bay in the coast. And where all the engineers go when they want to get away from Silicon Valley, that kind of stuff. But
or San Luis Obispo,
or San Luis
Oregon.
Obispo. Oregon. Yeah, George lived down here. George and I were in the same area. George, I still have a 1.2 gigahertz handy talkie you bought from me.
Oh my gosh!
You want it back?
There's no repeaters here.
I know, not anymore. I know. But anyway, when we got it first working, because I was sort of a instrumentation and performance nerd, I started looking at ways to improve it. And he and I had both read one of the big tomes on receiver design by Eric Rode, who started Rode and Shores, the test equipment company, but on receiver and radio design. And I was thinking, this phase noise thing, I think is sort of important, in terms of how clean the local oscillators were. And I said, hey, Wayne, I think I can make this a little bit better if you give me a week or two. Well, it took about 2 or 3 months to do it, but we were able to squeeze a lot more water out of the rock on that and get that performance up. The pin diodes, it was my bias, but the implementation was mutual. Both of us were designing that radio. It was sort of fun. We literally would have smoke tests, what just blew up? You'd hear me exclaim, when I turned something on, and I go, well, I think I biased that amplifier a little bit hot, and that was a little too much. But
so when you guys were designing some of the radios, how much conscious effort was there put into power consumption?
Quite a bit. That was in the case of the K2, because we both had operated together. Wayne was a diehard QRP guy at the time, and I was a QRO guy coming into QRP and discovering that was a fun part of the hobby too. And I like both aspects now. And he is very much, how am I going to get my batteries to last longer? We didn't have lithium ion batteries back then. It was, you want to carry a big gel cell. Actually, the first battery, I don't know if you have one of these, Thomas, but the 2.9 amp internal battery on the K2 that mounts to the top cover. Yeah, that's not super light, but that was all we had back then. And that was a big deal. The small story, by the way, the first prototype we showed, it was made out of foam. It wasn't a real radio. At Pacificon, the West Coast HWRB convention, and up in that time it was in Concord, near north of San Francisco, a little bit over to the east of it. And we had a big room of people. We told them we were going to introduce a new radio. We hadn't even told them about this thing yet. And it was all made out of foam. And we had the cards plugged in vertically like a computer, which is not how it ended up being ultimately. But we had color printouts of everything on the foam. And but we told them that it was going to do all this stuff, and they didn't believe us. But one of the key things is because I had been operating with him on field day. We talked initially about building a radio as the ultimate field day radio. And so the K2 sort of became that. So that's why it was efficient for power. And we're both been licensed since 1971. He was WN6HQH and I was WN6HHQ, and we didn't know each other.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
He was in Southern California, down near in San Diego area. I was born in the Bay Area in East Bay. And,
wow.
But we're both licensed in 1971. And so that was an interesting coincidence, K Brown Circle. But so that both of us, sort of adopted that in the K2 is how can we make this thing last longer on the batteries? And that's propagated through all the the lower power radios, and even on the high power ones, even the big ones. I mean, we try to make them as efficient as they can be, like on receive, even your 100-watt radio. You want that car battery to last for the whole field day or something, or as much as you can with your small solar panels. And of course, Thomas, when you operate portable with a KH1 or so, like you were commenting about, guys are commenting about it earlier. I think, George, you were commenting on the power efficiency on that one. That was one of the key discussions we had on it. And that was actually a dream of Wayne's. He was kicking around, and I sort of thought he was crazy to want to do it. And then
maybe this is just my fantasy dream here, but it always seems to me like when you guys come up with a new small radio, that it's like some fever dream from Wayne, and I have this cartoon thought that you're thinking like that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of, but he's like, no, you just don't get the vision, and then he goes off and makes. So
George, are you bugging our place? I mean, this sounds actually pretty prescient there. I mean, yes, I used to have that reaction. I don't have that reaction anymore. Wayne's crazy ideas generally are awfully damn good. And then we sort of, as Wayne says, a gestalt of our design process, we kick them back and forth, and I have to always make sure it's manufacturable and repeatable, and then how much water can we squeeze out of the rock to get the performance up without killing the battery drain and all that stuff. And we all go back and forth on that all the time. So it's sort of cool to do that. But yeah, every once in a while Wayne comes up with a crazy, like we started doing some of the antenna projects he's done, and Thomas knows all about these. He's played with all of them. And I go, what? And then I said, oh, that's sort of cute. I like that. And all of a sudden I'm selling a whole bunch of them. So I'm not complaining about it.
Well, and I love the AX3. Speaking of, I'll be a fanboy for just a minute. So Mark was my pack mule, and he picked up the AX3 at Visalia at the International DX convention.
Oh, okay.
And he shipped it up to me here in the cold north. And so that will be my primary antenna coming down to Hamvention, and I'm so excited. It's really well thought out.
Have you played with it already and stuff?
Yeah, you bet.
There it is. Yeah, it's all in that bag. Fits in that little bag that Tom.
It fits in that little bag, and I already had the 40-meter coil from my AX1, so it's great. I'm loving it.
It's really funny too, because I picked up mine, I can't remember how many days ago it was, but I actually produced the video pretty quickly because I thought, oh, this is new.
I haven't seen that one yet. I have to check it out.
Thomas got his video before I did, so I just gave up.
I'm usually not the first to do these things, to be honest, but the funny part was, and I've known about, the AX1 for a bit, and I was like, oh man, this is great. And I got it, and up the box. I'm having things delivered to a friend's house because our post office flooded after the storm. And so I went to his work, grabbed this out of his car, and I thought, I'm just going to go activate with it now. And so I just took the box to the field. I opened the box at first just to have it. So I have
you're cutting out a little
on
bit
the camera. And I was like, I'm going to turn off my video here to talk for just a second. That may help out with the audio.
Yeah, it was perfect for a while. Just all of a sudden popped up.
So, yeah, that's the thing about we have a storm going overhead right now, like a pretty nice storm actually. You can probably hear the thunder, and I think it's all affecting things.
Wow.
But anyway, I decided to take the antenna home and on the way home do an activation with it. So I opened up the box there, and the first thing I kind of think when I'm holding the box, I'm like, you can just tell this is a small antenna because the box is so dang small. Like it's so small, and I'm like, I'm gonna get an HF antenna out of this and get on the air with it. And of course, it was super easy to to deploy. I really like how I like the design of the tripod on it, of just taking little legs that come with it and plugging it in, and then it's got the same, I guess, 4-foot whip that's on the AX1 and the AX2. And then I really like the band switch, which is like a little plug that you pull in and push out. And so I hopped on the air. I got, I don't know, 10, 11 contacts on 20 meters pretty easily. And I thought, well, I'm going to go down. It kind of quietened down because the band conditions were horrible when I got on the air. I mean, they were really, really, really bad. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go down to 30 meters and just see if I can do it. And I had forgotten that the thing actually covers 30 meters. So I didn't move the band plug to 10 megahertz, which is labeled on there. I just tuned it up and got a 1-to-1 on 20 meters while the band switch was still on 20 meters and worked 3 stations very easily.
Wow.
And that was paired with the KX2. So it was, the right radio to pair it with. But
You know the reason for that plug-in, right? Why the little plug instead of a slide switch?
why is that?
Well, with a short antenna, depending on what frequency you're operating on, you can have a very low impedance feed point. Of course, we're matching that. We're giving some loading with some toroids inside the AX3. Yeah, there you go. And there's a little plug. And with the problem is with the switch is it can't handle sometimes on some of the bands, especially like in lower frequencies, the whip is really short for it. You might have a high current node there, depending on what frequency you're on. And the switches would overheat. And so what Wayne did, this is a great idea, is he said, hey, you can get much more surface area on a pin, gold-plated pin going into a gold-plated socket. Yeah. And so he creates a little plug, which basically is just a jumper plug. And it has an arrow on it showing which direction it's jumpering. And he has 4 corners to work with as you rotate it. And that's you select how many toroids are loading the coil, that kind of stuff. And then, legs pop in and out. He's putting it. This always reminds me of those 1960s era Outer Limits or Outer Limits or one of those sci-fi shows that looks like a little rocket ship landing on the moon.
It does totally.
Yes, it does.
With poor special effects, it's dangling from a string and sort of swinging back and forth. But
is the 40-meter add-on coil?
It screws on the top of that. Yeah.
Okay, and is that the same one as the KH1's 40-meter coil?
The KH1 does it have a 40-meter coil? Well, no, KH1 has a toroid inside, but
yeah.
Oh, I thought
it's the same one used for it's the same one used for the AX1. You can use the 40-meter coil on the KH1 as well, but I think you use it with. Gosh, I'm trying to remember now. I think you may use it with the BNC connector.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
No, it's the 40-meter coil that you're talking about from the AX1 that screws into the antenna stud.
Okay, right.
I'm not sure. I think the stud on the KH1, it's the same. We use the same whip on the KH1.
I haven't used that in a while on 40 meters, but
but it'll work on. I mean, it's if you don't advertise it, but it'll work after a fashion on 40. Obviously, you want a longer radial for the ground work.
Yeah.
Hey George, we're getting off site from remote though. We sort of
we are.
It's have you listened to the show?
It's always good for another show.
Rat holes are us.
It's generally my job to point that out, but thank you for doing that, Eric. Okay, so let's put a pause on the random questions about what's new at Elecraft. So let's talk about remote operating. So on the topic, I eventually want to get into how the Elecraft radios, the K4 specifically, is architected to make it useful for remote operating. But before we kind of get into the technical stuff, could you share with us your thoughts on remote operating? I mean, how do you see that evolving, the trends, the demand for that sort of thing?
Well, it's really actually, we felt we were ahead of the curve when we started designing remote into our system. And we designed it, planned the K4 to operate as a remotable radio built in without a lot of extra boxes outside like we used to have to do with the K3. With an Ethernet connection out the back and all that stuff. And of course, we can hook Wi-Fi into it with the external Wi-Fi boxes and that stuff too. But what we found is that the need is going up. There's a couple of things. None of us are getting any younger, and so you have more people moving out of their fancy house into one where you can't put antennas up. Or it might be a condo. It might be as you really get older, you go into independent living and then assistant living. But you basically still want to operate and have the same experience that you had before. And that was something I felt strongly about, having had a number of hams that had our radios that were trying to figure out how to operate when they no longer could put up a big antenna, but they wanted to put a wire out. But even there, that was getting difficult sometimes where they are. If they live in Florida with all the HOAs, that can be really difficult. So the remote stuff, they didn't want to just do, and you can do it with computer to computer type stuff. Brandon, who works for us, created Brandon Hansen, is one of the key software engineer architect for the systems level software in the K4. He created remotehams.com, and it still has that out there. He wrote that from scratch. Brandon did that, and nobody else. That's his one man band. He actually has had another couple of people come later on in later years have helped support it, but Brandon that was his dream. And actually I hired him to be when we were first on the K3 thinking of doing remote with the remote rig boxes. I had that set up. He didn't know about it, and he was doing something totally non-electronic. He was doing something else to make his money, but had done this on the side with remote hams. And he got recommended to me by a local friend, and he interviewed with me. I was looking for a support engineer for this remote stuff we were doing, just trying to get K3s to do it back. This is back, over 10, 15 years ago. And he came in to show me what he'd done to add the K3 to his remote stuff. And I was so impressed with him, I hired him. And initially he was going to be supporting stuff, but he's such a good engineer. He does hardware design, he does software. He's self-taught and just really sharp guy. And he's integrated very well with our culture here and the other engineers, and everybody it's a good fit. So he go forward to K4. We put his stuff inside the K4, but we had a lot of experience with that. So, but where it's going is people are, I still love operating like portable, like we do with the QRP radios, like you do, Thomas, and stuff. I'd never operate. I would never remote a QRP radio. That would be sort of like, I don't know, an oxymoron. That shit doesn't go together. But if you're, 100-watt station, or you have your home station, you have people. Well, good example. I was down in Florida for the Hamcation show. That's really probably the second biggest show in the country right now after Dayton, and it's a really good show. And I had two people that actually came right up to me and said, "Hey, one of them is an older couple that lives up in New Hampshire, and they're still mobile and stuff, but they have a house or a condo they go to during the winter because it gets very cold in parts of New Hampshire in the winter, down in Florida, classical snowbird situation. But he still wants, he can operate down there. He understands that, but he's not very much of an antenna and where they are in Florida. So he wanted to operate his home station. And of course, they ended up getting a K4 and a K4-0. They're going to get he's going to be one of the first people that gets one, actually. And I had another, but because they want to be able to use his home station while he's gone. And that's what I do with myself on the road. I work more DX from trade shows on my home station than I do at home. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. And and it's fun. It's just a different way of doing it. You've also got, there's a lot of that where people just can't put up the antennas they want, or a quiet location. You want to be able to get away from all the plasma TVs, and especially noisy little switching power supplies on solar panels, which are my little evil demon near me. I have one neighbor, if I point towards Europe, that if it's the middle of the day, luckily I don't hear Europe too much during the middle of the day. Wouldn't have been workable. But luckily during the times that Europe comes in, the fog is rolled in here on the coast, or it's night, in the evening times where you get gray line to it, and I don't hear it. So that's one area. Another one is we're seeing a lot of contesting stations. Multi-operator ones are located in nice areas. There's some like up in the Sierra Nevadas here, and other ones. There's one in Hawaii, a couple in Hawaii, as a matter of fact. One has a bunch of our K4 radios, and their issue was, can we get operators that want to fly out to Hawaii to operate, from California or somewhere else? They can't always get out, or it's either too expensive for some people. But what they can do with the remote, they'll have people working locally, and say they have 5 stations on the air. With big antennas, the usual, big contesting station. And they will, and this particular one has all K4s, and they'll have guest operators come in and operate with that. Another one is DXpeditions are doing it now. There's a couple of cases when a number of the islands out in the Pacific, like I think, is it Wake Island, and maybe, I don't think Midway was this way, but so they're actually almost game preserves. You can't camp out on the island because you don't want to disturb the wildlife, and they're very specific about that. You may be able to go on the island to put something there, but you can't operate from the island in a tent or something like that. They don't want human contamination of the island, at least not long term. again. Well, what some guys have figured out how to do now is I think the Northern California DX Foundation has been helping them fund this, is making remote inbox things. You literally have everything in a box with all the stuff. They go through Starlink now. Thank you, Elon Musk, for that. So they have a way of getting on the network and controlling it. Have people be guest operators, and actually young kids are doing this because a lot of them are computer literate to just use the software-based interface. And we had a bunch of guys on, I think it was on Rotuma Island, and they were running our stuff there that way. So that's sort of there's all different reasons. I mean, there's fun things to do with remotes and stuff also, and friends, club stations. That's a classic one, and sharing a station. So there's lots of solutions, and most of the higher end radios support it now. That's included. But I've been doing remotes since long before we started Elecraft. I used to remote it through a repeater. George, you're a repeater guy also. I know we met right that way, I think. And I still have a UHF repeater at my house, but I had built my own controller at that time, and I was remoting my, was it Kenwood 950? I'd written some software in Visual Basic of all things to remote control it, but also I could do it from my car with my touchtone pad, right? And I had a friend down a cell phone engineer down in Argentina, and I'd be driving home from work from my prior business. And I'd in my car talking to him, going to my house, and then having that, on a sked with him talking. So I was very much in the remote long before we really, saw it explode on the ham radio market. So having done, it has a lot in common with doing repeaters and stuff like that in terms of control technology. But other challenges, internet wasn't developed when I was first doing remote very much. I was doing it over UHF radio, but so that's what's driving it for a large part of it. And some people say, oh, that's not ham radio. Well, that's like everything's ham radio as far as I'm concerned. It's like FT8. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it has a purpose for some people. You can't put up the big antenna and you want to work 100 countries a different way, but you can do that. That's a great deal. And that's that same software, not FT8, but JT65 from Joe Taylor. Helped a lot of guys do moon bounce that never could do it before. So there's a different way to have fun with the hobby. But my big thing was always providing the same tactile feel. I'm a big front panel, as you might figure out. Both Wayne and I you want to be able to touch what you're doing. I mean, I want to be able to reach over there and puch the buttons because I know where they're at. I have to look at the radio, and so that's why we did our remote solution. Besides having software solutions, which we have also, the K4 Zero, which.
So I want to get to that stuff.
It just happens to have a K4 front panel on it, right?
I want to get to that in a minute. But before we get to that, when you thought about the K4 architecture, like I assume that from what you said, that one of the design criteria was to make it remotable. Yeah. So, like, what's the implication as you think about the architecture?
Architecturally, well, this is actually Brandon's really big contribution to us. He was basically. We have a Linux-based engine inside as the sort of the core system that drives the UI, user interface, screen and all that stuff, but also makes it quite convenient to connect to the internet. There's a lot of drivers and things for different I/O. It makes it really easy to use. Well, Brandon and I and our software guys were all talking, and one of the key things is that we architected, and really Brandon was the main architect of this, the whole internal operation on the K4, because we have microprocessors on a lot of the boards that talk to the main single board computer that runs Linux. They do a lot of the real-time work. That keeps our CW keyer being a really good keyer because you don't have any multitasking going on that interrupts your Morse code timing. And we have probably 6 microprocessors in the radio, and they're all talking either over high-speed USB or other serial buses back to each other, and also back to the from the front panel. You push buttons and it tells the main processor, hey, they push this button, change that screen, and then it does its thing. It's a client server architecture inside the radio. So from the very start, Brandon architected it. Like, we have a software module called KServe, that's the central server inside the radio. KServe talks to CUI, which actually happens to run on the same SBC, but part of CUI is also what's going on in the microprocessor on the front panel and all that piece of it. And say another CUI wants to come in over the Ethernet port. Hell, I'll give you another one so you can have 2 of those running at once. It doesn't care, because the command protocol is the same as what's published in our API for programming. So basically, people external to us could write software to their own API, own GeoGUIs and everything else, which has happened now. But the whole idea was that was the initial architecture that made it easy for us to develop the radio also in pieces. So and because Brandon had enough foresight, because he'd already done the whole remote hams thing, and had made the mistakes, through the problems. And he had that going for at least, 6-8 years before we even started doing the K4. So more than that, because he did that before we hired him. So probably 10-15 years. That's been around a long time. That's a Windows-based remote deal using just the sound card in the computer to do the remote. And even our K30 that we used to do plugged into his remote ham stuff with a USB cable to do his credit on that.
So inside the radio, then kind of conceptually, it seems like there's the radio, which is almost like a server in a way.
There's
server.
K-serve. That's the user interface but also the traffic cop that directs where do things go.
And that's kind of bound to the front panel
it's talking to the front panel through another software module called CUI. Everything starts with a K in our world, I guess. And so UI, user interface. Mm-hmm. So CUI drives the front screen. That's written in a application language called Qt. And then that's where all the soft buttons come from and stuff on the screen. And then the microprocessors are microchip PIC 32s on the front panel that has the keyer module in it and TR timing and all that stuff. That's talking to either over direct ribbon cable or directly over high-speed serial buses to the main RF board, controls all relays. So that software module is called KRAD. We call that. And KRAD is more the physical low-level control of relays and things like that. So you have those three modules all take K-serve, CUI, and KRAD. And K-serve sort of is the traffic cop between all of that and making sure it all does its thing right. And K-serve talks to the outside world, either over serial, USB serial, physical serial, or Ethernet. And actually, his credit, like I said, he can have multiple instances coming in. You can have multiple FT8 instances talking to us, for instance, on the main and stuff, and listening on two different frequencies, for instance, and decoding, in two different bands and decoding at the same time. And that comes in over the Ethernet. That's because Brandon architected it that way from the start. And actually, he snuck a lot of that in without even telling us. That was already in. When I started getting more serious about remote, he says, "Hey, I already got most of it done." I go, "What?" So, and we actually built it also so we could do K4 to K4 remote with that architecture, because it just plugged and played. My original demo I did for remote for people was I just had the CUI app running on a Linux dual boot mode on a what was it? It was on a Windows Surface tablet. So I had Linux running with just the CUI the small screen of it, the screen that's on the front of the K4, but that was running on that. But I could actually change the radio and talk back and forth, because that took Brandon about, less than a week to bring up and spin up so he could demo it that way. Obviously, that was a long way from an application, but I just
love the idea of Gorilla Feature Edition. Like, don't tell your boss, I'm just going to add this cool feature, and then 3 weeks later your boss comes in and says, "Hey, how about what about this feature?" And he's like,
"Well, it was actually simpler than that. It wasn't so much he was being subversive, though that sort of makes a good story.
It makes a better story.
We've all been subversive in our design. As a design engineer, I've certainly been subversive, but we all do that and impress our bosses, we hope, or get fired, one of the two. Luckily,
one of the two.
Yeah, but Brandon actually was making his life earlier because he knew he was going to have to support it, and architecturally, it made a lot of sense. So,
makes sense, yeah.
And it's not a lot of overhead for it. This actually it saves a lot of stuff.
You impress your bosses.
And go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry, you're both going at once here. Okay, other Canadian, Mike, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, because I'm a big fan of supportability. And if you solve it at the beginning, then I have to phone you less, or your phone rings less. Yeah. And if you do it poorly, you're doing tons of post-sale support. And so kudos for him. Yeah.
No, Brandon's a great guy. And he's good with people and stuff. We used to take him to some shows. He's moved up north. He's up in Redding now, far northern California. So he's got wireless internet at high bandwidth and Starlink on a load sharing router. He's got it all set up there now. So he's still part of the company, just like we're talking right now. So we have engineers both in-house and certainly up and down the coast and down the East Coast also. So it's pretty virtual that way these days. But anyway, that's how that came about.
If Halibut doesn't work out well, I may be calling you.
You never know. Yeah.
I think this is something else about Elecraft that, Eric, that I think is really notable that most customers, don't really think about. And it's the quality of the engineering team. And I think one thing that's really, it's hard to say this, to advertise it or whatever, but the caliber of the engineering team at Elecraft has always been really impressive. The DSP work, the RF design work, I didn't know about the remote architecture and the experience that this guy had before he actually re-implemented stuff for Elecraft. But I mean, having a really top-notch engineering team, I mean, it really shows in the output of what the product winds up being. So it's really impressive.
Yeah, we've been pretty lucky. People sort of, to a large extent, searched us out. It was amazing. I'm amazed. We self-grow some people here too, in terms of younger people coming in and stuff. We've got a couple people, actually one now, a recent graduate of University of California who's working for us, and actually of the mechanical engineering background, but his hobby is the electronics part of it. And so we saw some of the work he'd done through one of our other techs here. Actually in customer support, had met him at a local maker kind of get together in Santa Cruz. And he had designed a little synthesizer thing, using the music and stuff, and was doing all sorts of mixers and analog stuff, which is, you don't see a lot of guys doing analog.
Yeah.
And that as an analog guy, as part of my whole life, is having started amateur radio, it was all analog right back in those days when we were playing with it when we were kids. That impressed me, and he's comfortable around computers, and he's doing a whole bunch of stuff for us now, and plus he can do 3D printing, and he's got all that stuff at home and everything else. Wayne, by the way, is really big into 3D printing these days. That's why you're seeing it all over our stuff now in terms of.
Well, I noticed that with the AXE3.
Yeah,
it's
AX3.
a 3D printed enclosure, and it's very nice.
Yeah,
I can't get a 10% of the quality off my printer. And for those of you who've been listening and sending me comments about wanting to throw my printer out the window, it's going up for sale. I'm getting something different.
There's actual 3D printer companies that do volume production now. We use one called, this isn't an ad, it's just they're good ones to use. And you can do prototypes too with them too, called Xometry. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Xometry, okay.
Yeah, Xometry, Xometry. They'll quote, prototypes, and the prototypes won't be as cheap as the volume production, but you can turn around and say, okay, now I want 300 of these or 500 of these. And I get a big box. You could choose to do it on and offshore. Now, of course, I had to change to onshore. That raises the prices a little bit. But the delivery is a lot more reliable because it's not going through, the customs, additional customs right now, which is actually causing a lot of uncertainty on deliveries. Nobody can tell you exactly when you're going to get stuff from offshore. So, but what's neat, because they've got people acting as independent contractors that they qualify. These guys actually control the quality. You actually get pretty consistent quality, and you can reject it and they have to go back and do it right. It's like any other supplier. So
okay, so 3D printing rat hole question, if I may. Yeah. So like the paddle, the enclosure for some of the paddles, like on my KX2, for example, that's a 3D printed.
That was acrylic.
Right?
Yeah, that was 3D printed acrylic. Yeah, from a company in Silicon Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious, what is that actually printed in? Because that doesn't look like what would come off my 3D printer.
No, that was something that Wayne found. It's a company that there's several companies that were doing like prototype things for us. I actually, hold on a second. I got to show you a real interesting 3D print.
All we had to do is say 3D printing, and we were introduced to the next rat hole, right?
As long as nobody mentions bags.
Damn it, Mike!
Bags? I don't go there yet. I don't know what we're talking about. So one thing we did is we would test front panel designs and layouts with people that were sort of our inside field testers. Because that we'd sit and have lunch at a restaurant. I'd pull this out of my bag and say, "Do you think this looks like a real radio? What do you think? These knobs here." We always a piece of paper here was something.
Sure.
Took a picture of a P3, I think it was, a pan adapter that we had. But this is you're back there, you can see it a little better. So this is actually a K4 front panel. Literally, Wayne drew this, I think, in SketchUp. And I pasted this in here from a 3D, just a color printer. But the buttons are all realistic. Actually, if you look behind it, he even had the encoders in the right place.
For those who are
I won't tell you how much money this
podcast.
cost having this done back in whatever it was, 19, good Lord, and probably the 2015, 2015 or 16 when we were looking at this size one. We actually had one with a 5-inch screen, which I sort of said that's never going to fly. I got that one in a drawer too, but I won't show that one to you. But it would have been too small, but in terms of the UI. So this kind of stuff is sort of cool, but that was really expensive back then to do this. We're talking, probably $1,000 or something for this, to turn that in 4 days and have them do it for us back in those times. But I could probably get that for, I don't know, $100,
Your grandson could do it for you in 2 days.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
I don't know if the quality. We learned a lot about materials.
Well,
So the
yeah, that's
material
true.
we used, George, on the KXPD2 was it also that insulated the paddles and stuff, so we didn't have to have crazy as much wiring and stuff, to make the paddle work nicely. This is small CW paddle, and we did the KHPD1. That's also in 3D, but that's using a nylon based material, which is really nice. Same thing it's used on the AX3. Those are really rugged and they don't crack. They're more flexible just a little bit. We also one thing I love about 3D printing is when you mess things up, you can fix them real quick. Like our first 100 KXPD1s, Thomas knows all about this one. Wayne got a little over enthusiastic with the tolerances he thought he could maintain on the holes, like for the pivots and everything on it. And it's my job to always give him the bad news. I said, Wayne, this isn't working in manufacturing. We can't build it. He kept saying, oh no, I made them this size. I said, no, they're going from this size to that size and they're all over the map. And the tolerances were built, it's just, so we had to redesign things. And I think we went through 3 different turns on that very rapidly. Not all those got out in volume, but we took the first 100 customers we gave new paddles to, basically just unsolicited. We say, hey, you're going to get another one. And I basically sat down with my manufacturing team, and also as a user, I mechanically I had some strong opinions, and I told him, Wayne, you're going to have to add some extra set screws. He was relying on hitting a circuit board with an edge of a 3D printed part to say how wide the paddles were going to go where the springs are pushing out. Well, the tolerance on circuit board edges isn't held to 5 thousandths. I'm sorry, not very often. Yes, I said you need a set screw for that. We already had 2. We had one for the stop going in, which you really originally didn't have. So we had 3 set screws that went into. But where was he going to put the third one? And he said, "Oh, it's impossible. It's not going to happen." 2 days later, he says, "Oh, I figured it out," and he already had it drawn up. Yes. We had parts in the next day, and that solved all of our problems. Basically, we ended up with a good portable paddle that was nice and small and ergonomic. You can reverse it around. The knobs on the KH1 actually protect it and stuff like that. But yeah, 3D printing can be a big help. And Wayne really loves it. He's designing all sorts of crazy stuff. We've got baffles for the KH, what do they call it? The K4 stereo speakers, so they don't resonate inside the cavity and lose their stereo separation. Because if you do the math, it's at about 600 hertz. You've got about a quarter wavelength going down and back on the inside of the box, and you lose your separation. But he's got special 3D printed things that go around the speakers, and it's sort of fun stuff we do that with. But so they're good for problem solving. We got off remotes again. We got talking on. Yeah. Go ahead.
Vince, did you have a follow-up question?
No, it's fascinating, and I'm the way that it's really interesting to hear how you've incorporated that 3D printing and that rapid prototyping into the design of these things. And I'm sitting here listening, to the 500 hertz resonance point going, I like my CW at 500 hertz. I don't see the problem here. It's like a natural audio peaking filter, but when you lose that separation.
Yeah, well, what happened here, though, say if you're using the sub receiver to listen in 500 hertz, one part of the band in a pile up, and you got the other half here, you're going to lose that separation.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Actually, as we varied the frequency, you could sort of hear it move around like this in terms of where this spatial sense of, almost like we've got that pitch tuning that we've got in the K4 and the K. But it wasn't as clean as that. It was going sort of unpredictably. You could see what was going on. I was pointing out to him and said, "Yeah, it sounds a little mushy here, Wayne." And he started looking at it, and he did the single tone sweep. And I go, "Oh, okay, yep, Wayne know exactly. It's about a foot per millisecond. Figure it out. You can." Frequencies we're operating at are enclosure size, so you have to be really careful. Yeah, so we got that all fixed. That was sort of cool stuff. Right on. So anyway, and answering your remote, that's sort of how we did the architecture for the remote, George, is that sort of flowed directly from that, getting back from 3D stuff. Sorry about that. Rabbit holes are really good on this show.
We're nothing if not rabbit holes. So okay, so let's shift into the I'm going to warm up my credit card phase of the show. So it's
what we do.
And we're damn good at it. That's what Paul said on the last episode. Thank you, Paul.
So you guys have approached doing the remote stuff in a couple different ways. Like in the old days with the K3, it was using a third party piece of hardware, and it worked, but it was like a bunch of cables, and you know, some work. So describe what are the options now. So I've got a K4 sitting in front of me here. If I want to remote this, what are my options today?
Well, today you can remote to any other friend you have that has a K4 right now. So all you have to know, and as Mike was pointing out before, you know, they do have to forward, I think, one port on their router to get through to their radio from the outside, as in terms of you coming in. But they can give you their IP address, or if they're not a static IP, they can use one of these free services that says WA6HHQ at self-IP or dynedns.org, and you run a little program on your Windows computer and leave it on, and it'll keep updating that in case your ISP changes your local address. But basically, if you know the address of your friend's radio on the internet, you basically can connect directly to it. And we set the radios up so that you can go K4 to K4. That was a way to validate a lot of our software, because we knew the hardware was going to take a little longer. And the K4 basically becomes a client. And then any K4 is already a host. It's there right now if people have the latest software. And you basically have a little globe you push on the screen, and it brings up both your configuration you can save a list of people you want to connect to and addresses and what their we basically have a password driven system, so you can log in with your password peer to peer.
So if I connect to your,
that's very cool.
A quick question, then I'll hand it over to you, Mark. So if I wanted to, let's say, control your radio from my K4, while we're doing that on your end, I presume you can't do anything.
No, I can do. We're both controlling the radio, so if I wanted to mess you up, I could sit and tune one direction when you're turning the other direction. This happens at trade shows all the time. So I have 4 remotes. You know, a couple of software-driven ones just on an iPad or a MacBook, or on a PC portable tablet. Controlling my station at the same time. We can actually have like 4 people in there, as long as you have the bandwidth on your internet connection. You can have up to 4 people. We limit it there because of bandwidth concern on our side, but in terms of making sure we don't overload the system, that doesn't overload it in terms of the radio. So obviously you have to have some way to communicate with each other. We don't build that into the radio, but you can use Discord or one of these other messaging services where you can talk. A lot of contest stations do that. They have all their
like an intercom,
some intercom to talk.
But as far as the radio, like piping the radio audio and the CW key,
that's all done automatically. There's nothing to wire up. Literally, it's all voice over internet. You hook up an Ethernet cable, or in my case on the K4s, because they don't have the Wi-Fi built into them, but I just hook up an external little Wi-Fi extender with a short, 6-inch Ethernet cable. The K40 has Wi-Fi built in, so it basically I can walk around the company with it has a battery option for it, and sit down or in house I can sit down in front of the TV, and while I'm watching the Warriors game, which unfortunately I'm recording right now, but that's okay. Don't tell me what happened, but I could be working DX at the same time from the couch. So that's.
Did you have a technical question?
I'm watching it.
Oh, you're watching the game. Do not tell me who's winning.
No, I'm 100% respect that. So
no, I'm going to go home. I want the experience of either groaning because we just lost this is basketball, but we lost Curry for at least a week and a half, if not more. He hurt his hamstring a little bit, so that's always a big deal. But we actually won the game that he disappeared in the first 6 minutes because he hurt it, so whatever it was. And so that was pretty impressive. So it's still interesting. So I'm going to watch it without having watched the news or the newspapers. When I get home after this meeting, I'm going to fire up the DVR, the recorder on Comcast, and so I can see what I got. And if it's really bad, I can always turn it off.
So today's option is K4 to K4.
That's K4 to K4,
and you don't have to buy a thing; it just does it. That's okay.
Yeah, and then you've also got software apps. Like for instance, I got an iPad here. I'm just going to bring it up. This is one of Marcus's deals, and I know Mike's very familiar with these.
No, nothing about it.
Marcus Rokosh.
Roshkosh, yeah. So
DL8
that's called K4 Control. I just brought it up. It's going to say, you probably can't see all the details, but it says click here to connect. I happen to have either my local network at home. If I'm operating inside the house, this is outside. My particular router doesn't loop around, so I can go there and connect. And lo and behold, if you wait a few seconds.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Magic. So now I'm controlling my station.
So
I can change frequencies and do all that stuff. And
so when I first saw a tablet talking to a K4, it was a Windows Surface.
Yeah,
So
I have that
client.
also. That one's been that was delayed a little bit. That's one of the classic ones where we ran out of resources and we got, we had to finish some other stuff first and also get someone involved, also additional labor onto it. So that's back in progress, by the way. That's not dead. So
because I thought that
let me stop this here for a second. Here, I'm going to disconnect it. There we go.
I didn't know that there was an iOS app at all. I mean, I thought it was just going to be the Windows one. For now,
but Marcus has done this. He's got this for Flex radios, ICOM, Yaesu and stuff. They're all a little bit different because each radio is a different base in terms of how it works and stuff.
So,
but basically you can use your iPad. This microphone actually I bought to go on the air with. It's a USB microphone. That's the one reason I actually even have one is because I wanted to sound much better than shouting at the microphone in my iPad. WA6HHQ, try to break pileups. I actually broke a few pileups that way, but he has it for MacBook also. So I have a MacBook, which I carry with me at the shows and stuff. And I'll be set up with that at the date. And you'll see the Elecraft remote corner.
I'm going to plug mine. Marcus's software will work with has a CW keyer built into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you can do the software or the USB to RS-232 interface to plug in a Morse code paddle to it. If that's the case, then Halakey officially works with the Elecraft K4.
So what does the magic to convert the physical paddle jack to something that goes to the radio?
That must be the software. Well, in K4 we don't need one because we've already got the CW protocol built into our remote. It's already being handled by the inside the radio. In other words, if you have a paddle hooked up to your K4 keyer inside, we'll generate.
No, I mean if you have the iPad.
Like the iPad. You can come into it. I think you can do it. Bluetooth's a little tough because if you're getting your side tone from the iPad, it's going to be delayed. You'll have a hard time sending. But
yeah.
One thing it is coming with this has been something we've sort of been leaking out for a while is the K pod that we've made for some time, which will connect to a K4 over USB or to a Windows computer or to an iPad. That can generate. We actually have software. There it is, George. If you want to hack your iPod, this is the right show to be talking to about this.
Yes,
we have a hack for K-Pod owners. We were testing the protocol that was K4 to K4. We also use the same family of PIC processor in the K-Pod. So I said, "Hey, Paul, can we move that over there?" And he goes, "Yeah, we could." And about a week later, we had everything up and running in there. So if you remember on the K-Pod, they had a jack in the back. There was a 3-pin jack, like a 3.5 millimeter. That was output.
Yes,
open drain just for turning relays on, or which never really gets used for that, but it was there. Well, if you take those 3 transistors, little ones off the board, and literally just heat them up with their solder iron, it'll stick to the solder iron. You're going to have to shake them off; they're so small, and you just bridge across them with a solder blob or a wire if you want. They both work. The PIC can make that an input. It has pull-ups on them inside the PIC. The PIC already has pull-ups on the input, and so you can plug a paddle into it. We have the same code that runs exactly the same way with the same protocol that maintains the timing on your CW fist. We timestamp. If you're sending the keyer, we're sending dot and dash. The speed is coordinated between that and what you've set either on the software app or on in the case K4 to K4, you're not using that for it, but but anytime you adjust speed on the software app like VK4, virtual K4 for the Windows, we're going to try to get it on Marcus's stuff too. He's got another pod that works with it, but I'm not quite sure how well it works. So ours works, I know really well because we've already tested it K4 to K4, and also with our software. But it generates a protocol that is sent over the Ethernet, basically a serial protocol if you want to think about it. There, basically commands to say, okay, dot. First of all, the speed's always coordinated between what you're hearing here locally, with your side tone offset, with what the radio is transmitting with at the other end. They track each other. That's all going on in the background when you adjust the speed on your software app, say. So this is say it's plugged into Marcus's software and he's got it integrated, or VK4 we already have integrated it. It'll send that stream up, which basically has a command to send a dot, a command to send a dash. It'll generate exactly the same speed using the keyer at the other end. It's very quick, not much delay. And the key thing is it also maintains your fist because it knows when you've weighted more than a dot to, character element to element or a character to character time, we're time stamping all that stuff. So you can see it if you pause a little bit, or if you use a straight key, we'll do the transitions and they go up and down. And it's local side.
So if you send garbage, it'll send garbage.
It'll do whatever you do wrong.
Yeah, which is really nice.
Oh, good. I'll fit right in.
Yeah. Well, look at my call sign, guys. I for those of you that are CW ops, you probably already know this, but WA6HHQ has 12 dits in a row.
It's a lot of dits, man.
At the end. And in a contest or DX, I found I have a lot less likelihood of having my call busted. I do get 10 dB of recognition being in the industry. That helps. But
that helps.
10 dB. But beyond that, I learned that if I added like another dot time of a space in between the groups of 4, just to space it a little bit wider, people didn't bust it as often. So I do that. But if you have some of these things, some systems won't let you. They won't keep track as well of that. They expect it to be always equally spaced and so on. So
let me make sure I understand what. Hang on.
I was going to say, sending the data, this element data, over the internet is, as Eric knows, incredibly hard.
Yeah.
Right. That's why you're timestamped to the millisecond.
Yep.
And
or less.
You can't just send a dash. You got to send. When did the dash start? When did the dash end? How long was the space?
Yeah.
And
we know how long. But if we know when the dash starts, because that's when we send the element initially. We say you start out with that. We know the length of the dash because you're running the same speed on both ends. So because we're not.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we timestamp it at the end. So we there's always at least one timestamp on each element, so you know where it is. And so we can maintain the spacing any way we want. So if I pause longer, of course it's going to pause. But as soon as I send something, okay, it knows that's going out. And here's a timestamp of when it. So everything has at least a leading edge timestamp on it.
And in theory, it's one element latent. Plus
roughly, yeah.
Whatever
well, plus whatever your jitter, whatever your jitter is on
whatever your jitter is.
Yeah. We've been optimizing, for instance, our latency lately to even get it better, and we found some opportunities. Of course, if you're on a local area network, you can take certain pieces of buffer latency on, say, the server side where it's receiving that CW stream, because you don't want it to mess up anything, because occasionally you're going to have a pause. We're not going to. It's not going to sound good on CW. But if you got a big enough buffer, and hopefully not too big, but whatever it needs to satisfy your particular quality of connection, over the Ethernet for jitter and dropout, not dropouts, but jitter mostly, that will get a little bit later at the overall transmission with the buffer, but it's always going to be sounding just like you sent it. That's the key thing, is you don't have that affect you. And that we've already.
I bet you I send worse than the worst part of the internet coding could do, right?
Yeah, it's not easy, and it helps that Wayne and I are both been longtime CW operators, so we were very aware of this very early on. So when Brandon was writing the code with Paul, our firmware engineer that does a lot of the internals on the microprocessor side, because we had to make sure everything was in sync on both ends. Brandon's buffering scheme was different for that, of course, than he does for voice and things like that. So that we want to have the minimal delay time. Contester guys are very sensitive to that because the number of contacts per hour adds up. And if you start adding, especially large delays, 60, 100 millisecond delays that really don't have to be there if you can get away with it, you have to figure out which way to do that, either automatically or manually. Give people a way to adjust it if they need to. But we've been through that whole cycle on all that stuff for quite some time.
Eric, I'm just going to go on record. You and Wayne are obviously very awesome CW operators, and you've got a good test grouping of people within your organization to test CW out that really know their stuff. I'm hereby volunteering to be a crappy CW tester for hardware.
I can't make it better. I wish I could, but
there might be some paths you want to follow with artificial intelligence.
There you go. We can clean up your CW. That's a whole new feature. I like that.
Right,
we can make you sound like a good CW operator.
As long as we have we just need a physical order. We just need a physical button on the front that says AI on it, so you can press it and then it does its AI thing. That's what we need.
There's one downside of running a company, though, is that I don't get a chance to get on CW as much as I want. It's casual, but my speeds dropped way down. Wayne gets on, probably 80% of his time on CW, and I balance. But when I get on, I'll just get on sideband, I'll get on a data mode, or I'll get on CW or something like that. And then for me, it's just more. What do I feel like doing tonight? And so but I don't really get on all that often as much as I used to, obviously, before we were in this business. but I love doing it when I'm doing it. But my speed is slowly degraded. I'm not in the 40s anymore. I'm probably a 30. I'm comfortable at 30 words a minute, and I can hear all the exchanges at 35. But I'm not. If you want me to have a long conversation at 35 words a minute, I'd be screwing up right and left now. I've definitely gotten a little bit slower. It's just exercise. You have to get back in and get the muscle memory of the brain connections.
So I want to make sure I understand this K-pod thing before we move on.
Okay, if you want,
Here we go.
If you want to modify so if you want to modify your K-pod, George, and
Yeah.
we'll probably put this up on the website too. There's two things for local side tone. We actually take a KX2 speaker and drill 3 holes in the bottom. You would have to drill these. We'll give you a template in the bottom of your K-pod.
Mhm.
We're using the little for the first tests. We were using the piezoelectric beep thing when you push the buttons, because it will track the pitch, but it's not wide range, so it wasn't very loud. But we at least had a side tone. But now we take that speaker and actually hook it up across where the piezo transducer is inside the K-pod for the button beeps. And an 8 ohm or 4 ohm speaker is much lower impedance than that piezo transducer. It takes all the energy, so the piezo transducer is quiet. And we put 3 holes, like 3/16 holes or something in the bottom in a triangle, right under the KX2 speaker, which is held with an adhesive sort of rubber band, which is the same thing we use in the KX2 back panel, if you ever looked at those. And that's a nice sounding little speaker. So that gets it nice and loud. So that's the one physical thing that you'd have to do. Or we might, do some, I haven't thought about whether we do it for a charge, because I don't know if I want to tie people up doing it here on that. And then you just have to do a software update with a different version of the, or later version. We have to put it up on the web of the K-pod firmware, and all the old K-pod stuff still works exactly the same way. You don't lose any of those. You just have one USB cable. You plug it into your application, and away you go.
So then you this works with Marcus's.
Well,
iOS
not yet.
software,
That's actually not on the table yet for his stuff, because he's already got a CW solution. I don't know. I have not played with it yet, so I'm not sure if he needs this or not. But if he does,
want me to send you
we'll
one?
make it available.
So,
No, I'll just buy one of them.
You need
CTR
a
one.
CTR2.
Wait.
A CTR2.
Oh, the CTR, yeah.
Yeah, the CTR2. Does he
Time
generate
out.
local side tone on CTR2, or so you get it in the little CTR box?
I think so.
I don't think it does.
Because if you're going over, well, I'd have to see what the delay is, because I'll let you know. A long time ago, back when we were doing K3 remote testing, and I had a K3 with a remote rig box in one room, and I was in here, and I couldn't send worth a darn. I couldn't figure out what it was. And I was listening to the side tone coming back over the local network.
No,
Even that delay
Marcus's
was enough.
software does side tone on the local computer. So it's not a hardware microcontroller that's generating your side tone. The left and right paddles are being sent to the software on your local computer. The software on the local computer is sending the side tone out its audio interface.
Which means
So
you're also subject then to any
network latency.
Yeah, you're also subject to some of the multitasking switching under Windows.
Mac OS
yeah.
is very good about audio because they're in the music industry. That's kind of what they're designed for, low latency audio.
Which is, I'm sorry, Mac what?
Mac OS. Mac OS.
Oh, you're talking about Mac.
OS.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, okay. No, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Windows has terrible latency.
Yeah. So we had to make it work under Windows. That's why the other reason we made ours so robust, because yeah.
hang on.
Okay, sorry.
This is like too many hams getting together. Surprisingly,
What's the
You're
running
gonna
joke?
have to edit this down, George. We're going.
No,
yeah,
I don't think
I
that's
gave up
edited.
on that years ago. So let me. I want to drive to one conclusion, then we'll go back to here. So K-pod, take some transistors off, do some jumpers, stick the speaker in the bottom of the K-pod,
And put in new firmware.
put a new firmware. Then
Plug
the USB
plug your paddle on an 1/8 inch plug into the back of it, and you've now got a keyer that will talk using our protocol over USB to an app. The only app that supports
Windows app.
The Windows app, when we release it, and actually it's coming pretty soon. I can't put the exact date on it, but it's more real now. We're doing all the cleanup on it that I just didn't have time to before. I've been showing it at shows for a while. People have seen it. It works a lot better now than it did a year ago by a long shot. And that one already supports the K-pod. In other words, I can plug a single USB cable in to it. And there's actually, we're going to be doing a version called the V-pod, which actually also builds in feeding audio the other direction of that USB connection to basically, it'll have several things in it, but one of it it'll do is you'll be able to put headphones into a jack in the back of it. And this is a 3D printed case. I have one in the back here. I'm not going to show it to you because we're going to change it a little bit, but this is a little bit bigger than a K-pod. But if you want to just hack and have fun, you can hack your K-pod to do it. you'll be listening on it's hard to have headphones and something coming out of a speaker you're listening to. So in terms of CW, like you usually want to mix the side tone with the audio. So we've actually got the ability to run the audio back out over the cable into the V pod when it comes out, because it'll have the ability to actually mix the audio, and you can plug your headphones or external speakers into the V pod.
So the use case for this, and then, Mark, I'm going to kick it over to you because you probably have 20 thoughts to throw in here, but I want to simplify this a little bit. So the 21. Use case, the use case for this is going to be, I have a Windows-based client and I have my K-Pod, and I could use my K-Pod now, or maybe some future product that has even more I/O. And so I could just take my laptop with me, my Surface or my little laptop or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's the UI for my radio. Plus,
and you could be connecting over 4G or 5G to, you are going wireless, right? And that's sort of, and you're controlling your home station, your home K4 or whatever. So
that's very cool. Yeah. Okay.
I've already done it with the VK4 stuff, so I know it works.
Yeah.
Mark.
So HWRB V2. Are you familiar with my HWRB product?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. Okay,
so it is a small device that looks very similar to this, because it is exactly this. A little heat shrunk device. It's got a 3.5 millimeter socket on one side and a USB-C on the other.
Okay.
The current version is basically, it's just an FTDI chip with the tip and ring routed to CTS and DSR, right? So it is a Morse paddle to USB serial interface appliance.
And you got pull-ups on the pedal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've sold several hundred of these. They work great. They were originally designed with Flex in mind, but it sounds like with Marcus writing software for Elecraft, it works perfectly with Marcus's software. So I'm sure it'll work with the Elecraft stuff.
Okay, well, maybe you can send me one. I'll plug it into mine, and we'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I will. I'll do that. I am working on a V2 that will be this plus MIDI, so it does the serial interface and a MIDI interface, and it will also be its own sound interface on the USB side, so it can be the sound output from your local computer, and it will have a local keyer implemented in HWRB.
And you'll be able to mix the side tone with the audio from the...
Yes. So it'll generate its own local side tone, and it will mix the audio from the computer to your headphones.
Now, we're always looking at one thing we do is that, we're not only get things from us. We want to see as many third-party people doing it, because there's no way we're going to think of every single darn solution that's out there. And so that's the same reason we've been letting people, like, for instance, Win for K4. He's got that fully remotable now. He's got streaming audio, streaming pan adapter. He's using the same protocol we use to talk to the remote for the radio. So
I've been working with remote ham radio folks on with the MIDI interface. I'm actually using the MIDI velocity and then a control channel velocity as well to send 14 bits worth of millisecond precision timing information.
That's cool.
The microcontroller that is detecting the paddle presses is actually timestamping the events.
That's
and
cool.
We'll send that to the computer. So the computer you don't even have to worry about USB latency or the computer latency.
Well, we should talk, because I could give you there's lots of things we could do to help you out on that. So
yeah. So anyway, we'll connect afterwards, and I will send you a V1 HWRB, and then as I'm working on V2, I'll send you one of those as well.
Okay, just tell me what it's working on and what I can plug it into, and then I'll play with it and stuff.
We are only one building apart at Hamvention. Elecraft's in building 2. Yeah. We're in building 3.
Oh, okay.
That's a good point. I'll bring you one. I'll bring you one to Hamvention.
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell who was talking there for a second.
All good.
Everybody.
No, I think your audio and mouth are moving a little differently synced right now. That's what I was being fooled by. So I'd look over, and your mouth wasn't moving, but I was hearing your voice.
That's a pretty cool effect, Mark.
Yeah, I know. But
so at Hamvention, Mark's frozen.
Okay, so you're in 3 and we're in 1. Okay, yeah.
You're in 1.
Yeah. By the way, I'm doing a Q&A at there's a K4 what do you call it? Users group meeting on the first Friday at 10:15 in Forum 1, that big room, and that Scott K, was it K0MD now? I forget his call sign now.
Yeah,
he won't be there because he has to be out of town. I think he's got a daughter getting married or something. So, but TV Bob will be there. A number of other people. I think Ed Munns, W0YK, and a bunch of other Dave Anderson, K4 SV, who obviously a big remote operator too, and has a lot of K4 stuff. But it'll be a Q&A session, and I'm sure they'll beat me up on everything from delivery times to the usual TV Bob routine. He'll always have something he gets me with that I don't expect. That's okay.
So speaking of delivery, so we talked about a bunch of things so far. So just to recap, the K4 to K4 thing is built into the product today. So
it's been in for months.
That's there. The Windows application to front end a K4 is. I saw you
sometime later this summer. I may surprise you earlier. I'm just being conservative. I've got somebody who's working on it right now. So
okay, so
someone who's an experienced remote person too, which helps. So
and then the Marcus's iOS client.
That's both on the markets for Mac Store and iOS Store right now.
Oh, okay. And then
basically look up. It's called K4 Control. That's what he calls his Mac stuff. He hasn't done it for the iPhone. I don't know how many people want to operate with their phone, but sometimes it's fun to be able to pull up your remote and just listen to it.
I operate my Flex from my iPhone all the time.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll probably talk him into doing that because I'm sure for him it's just a smop, literally, because he's already got the UI infrastructure to support it. So he has the back end now since he's done it on the iPad and stuff.
So then the last option is the K4 Zero physical control head. And
K4
so
Zero.
What's the status of that?
We're going to start shipping units out. It looks like about 6 to 8 weeks from where I am right now, if everything comes in on time. And I always put a disclaimer because of our import stuff. Though I don't think I have a lot of imported stuff coming in for it. It's funny, you don't even know what you're buying these days. You're buying through U.S. distributors and other stuff. Where it's sourced, it's hard to find it sometimes. And you get surprised, and all of a sudden you can't get a part. But that said, I've got enough material. I know I have enough for the first, what I call the first field test group, but they're all buying customers, and I'll have them all covered. And those will be going out in that window with. We're ordering higher quantities of the circuit boards right now. All the hardware's been done. We were making some final tweaks on one of the I/O boards recently, but that was the only small change. And the software in that pretty much is nice and stable because it's really the same. It's an extraction of what's going on inside the K4 without all the other K4 stuff going on that you don't have to worry about when you're trying to be a server also and the other stuff you can do. So it's up and running. We've got the Wi-Fi working on it, and actually,
so that would be
either a lot of DX here, so that with it. So
that's either Wi-Fi or Ethernet.
Wi-Fi or Ethernet. You can do either way, and it's dual band. It's 5 gigahertz and 2.4. And
is there a price?
I haven't set the final price yet because I'm worried about on a couple of things on the flat panel displays right now that we buy from a U.S. company, well-known one. They come in out of China. I didn't realize that, though I suspected it. It wasn't a big deal before, but now it is, and we just don't know where the tariffs are going to settle down. We do have a bunch of them on order that we know what the tariff is, and it's not the major gigantic one. They bought a bunch of inventory, and I had to pay them ahead of time to have them sequester it for me. Let's put it that way. So I've got enough sequestered to cover my early shipments and stuff. I've already got, if you want to get in line, just go to our website. You'll see a page you can get to if you search on K4 K4/0. There'll be one where you can just give us your name and email and everything else. No money. It's just hey, I'm interested in buying it. Not just looking at it, but I'm interested in buying it. It's just a good way to gauge the market. Now, you obviously don't get 100% of those, but we have quite a few. It's going to be a busy summer and a real busy fall.
And you'd mentioned something a few minutes ago about at Hamvention. So like we were joking around that by the time people listen to this, that would have been history. But so what did you have at Hamvention in the way of remote operating that you were demoing?
Yeah, so I'll have both of Marcus's apps running, one on a MacBook. These are all controlling my station at home here in Aptos. The same, I use that one. I could also control it Brandon's or any number ones, but I have that one going, and I actually have them all on. Well, sometimes I split it in half, but I can go up to all 4 of them. I have a VK4, the not unfinished version, but it's a good working prototype, running on a Surface tablet, 12-inch or 14, whatever the bigger Surface tablet is. It's Windows, and then I have a K4 Zero running to it. So I've got four things talking to my home station at the same time. We bring, just like Flex does, we bring a Ethernet drop to the booth, and then I've got a high-speed Wi-Fi router right there. I'm on 5 gigahertz, so all the guys on 2.4 don't jam me. And of course, I'm only 5 feet away from the router, so it doesn't really matter. But we're able to do good. You'll have all those running in a corner, so you won't be able to miss me there. It'll be pretty obvious.
Oh, good.
Who's running CW right now?
Okay, so I had to get my CTR2 hooked up to my iPad. I thought I was muted. But yes, the side tone.
Yeah, we heard the
right
whole
out.
exchange. Go ahead.
Spoiler, not muted.
It comes right out of the
339.
iPad.
Right out the iPad. How's the delay? I wonder what the delay is. It'd be interesting to
My
measure.
CW is terrible, but I think it's okay.
Well, they gave you a 339.
Oh, you actually worked somebody while we were talking to you?
No, I've got it on mute.
That happens all the time.
No break-in, but same idea.
Yeah.
Actually, you can probably see the 6600 back here going in and out of, or was going in and out of transmit on 2 meters. So
there you go.
But,
hey, does this CTR MIDI guy have those in stock, or does he take a while to? He doesn't really he doesn't really have an order page that you can just place an order and pay your money.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, he does. I thought you have to get a quote or something from him, or
he's pretty fast.
Okay. I'll get one of those in too. So I'll get one of Mark's things to play with, and I'll get one of his and see what we can do with it.
So
you'll laugh because Lynn and I have talked about this stuff, and I don't use because I'm not a CW operator.
Yeah.
And finally I said, Lynn, whatever you do, make sure you charge enough for it. You can always put it on sale, right? And sure, and I don't know, somebody else I had this conversation with. Finally, he gets back to me, goes, yeah, I should have charged more. I said, because anyway.
That's the classic ham radio mistake. You're sole proprietor or whatever, and you have to be really careful about that. And we people all think we're getting rich off of this. Believe me, it's a labor of love for these businesses. We do well with it. I mean, I've obviously been doing this 26 years, and I've been able to survive and have a retirement.
I've been doing mine for 3 years now, and I still make $125 a week. That's my salary right now.
Yeah.
At least I'm not having to put money into the business anymore. So I'm calling that.
There you go. Yeah. No, we took most of ours out pretty quickly within 2 years after starting it. So we developed it. We wanted to have high performance for whatever we did, either high performance for QRP radios or both low current drain, and also attractive to operate and stuff, and all features, but also make it worth it so it had some value beyond just how much are you marking up hardware, because you're not going to really survive doing that. You've got to really have some big value added, and so that's kept us really healthy. And so I can hire engineers. I can actually be in a building that's larger than my garage. What a concept. We're in a pretty good sized space here, and we've got a number of good people have been with me. People have been with us 20 years now. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I got people that are retired, and it's
anybody I've ever spoken to at Elecraft, they just have the customer service gene. They're awesome to deal with.
That's a personal thing. Both Wayne and I feel strongly about this, but that's been a personal management thing. I mean, my whole life, whenever I've built organizations, I make sure there's people. They got to understand that everywhere you're serving that customer. It doesn't matter if you're shipping or if you're, if we don't ship. If we can't get stuff out the door in a reasonable period of time, we're in trouble. In the case, sometimes it's impossible because there's other extenuating circumstances, but we shouldn't be doing it because we're screwing up. And so, we want to make sure that's good, but they got to care about it. That's why I always hire customer support technicians that really get what's going on with ham radio. I mean, and both of them are hams. They're not as active as Wayne and I might have been, doing it at their age.
Sure.
But they both fully understand it really well. And
it shows.
Yeah. And even for remote stuff, we actually, one of our guys used to work for an ISP as an engineer doing stuff for wireless ISPs and wired down here in the Monterey Bay area. So he's very competent on the internet too, which is good. And of course, Brandon is wonderful. We don't put him in front of customers because he never get any work done, but he has talked to them, and he talks to a lot of the developers, like, people like Tom VA2 FSQ or with Win for K4 or Marcus and stuff. We can hook up developers of software that's going to work with our stuff, and we'll provide them a lot of input from this end. But if it gets tough and they have something weird they're seeing, we'll just have them talk to the engineers like Brandon and stuff. So
Like I know it's getting a little late in the show, but I wanted to say you're talking about customers.
We need another rat hole. Go right ahead.
Yeah. You're talking about customers. One thing that's always stood out to me about Elecraft, and actually from what I see from the sidelines too, also Flex Radio. But you guys, I mean, you and Wayne, especially Wayne, I see a lot. You really stick your like necks out in the like fire hose of customer input.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're out there right after a product release. You can
talking to people. Yeah.
Criticism, praise, questions,
For sure.
all that stuff's coming through. And I don't know how you guys have the time to do what you do, but you really do. What I love about it is you're not afraid of customer input. And I can tell you from I can tell you from a standpoint of being a tester, that you are very welcome of really critical input even early on, or through a product design, and you implement things. And I think that's the reason why your radios are not the kind that come out and the early adopters feel like beta testers, because they're thoroughly beta tested. And so I think just that whole ecosystem you have of having the customer's needs and wishes and communications and all that right there, right up front. Like you were saying, you're hiring the right people and you're doing the right things, because that is really what makes Elecraft such a great company.
Well, we got good customers too, and we got people like yourself and all the other guys here,
that buy everything you make.
All you guys. Yeah, well, no, but what I'm saying is that, but the fact that you put a lot of time into what you do, right?
Yeah,
in terms of what your web pages and stuff, that's really cool. And I can always tell when you talk about a product. Because we can see where the references are coming into the website, right? Mm. So you immediately can see who's mentioned XYZ product, and if people are buying it or.
QRPers in the logs again.
There you go.
So
it's all good. You'd be surprised how many QRPers that you only think are QRPers have a really big kilowatt station or more. It's an interesting mix. Some are diehard QRP. Some are never leave their house with the QRP. They have QRP just from their table. Other ones would like to build more than anything else, and they may operate a little bit, but the 4 days in May thing, the Dayton's a great deal. I always wander around at their vendor night. Usually we're burned out from the show, so we don't do a table. But
I miss not being able to get there, but we have a banquet that night.
Yeah, I know. That's always tough. Trade shows, people don't realize how much we lack. The people that was working at the show, how little sleep we get. I'm sure George does, because he's worked trade shows in his prior lives.
God, no, I've been at Hamvention the last several years, and
it's a lot of work.
Like for us, we have 2 dinners, and we can barely get from 5. Well, we close at 5, and we open up at 6.
Yeah,
and you got
for the dinner,
and it's not like you got staff that goes over and does it. It's we're all pretty small companies when you think of it. So
Flex does a good job too. They've got a good relationship with their customers and stuff. So I think we all watch each other and how we operate, and we all know each other because it's a small industry here. So
we all need each other.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
100%.
That's the truth.
Yeah. And
it's all good.
Well, you want everybody to be successful. I mean, you do
100%.
Yeah, it's really important. Big, small.
Plus we egg each other on, so that's the best part.
That's the fun part, though.
We both get better, so that's
exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah, we all benefit.
From MFJ that. Leaving is a big hole.
It is, yeah. I saw amplifier sales at the low end jump up quite a bit when that happened. I was surprised. He's Martin was the big elephant in the room, because if you think about it, he probably had the most successful U.S. in terms of a profitable company. Over a long period of time. He was very successful and smart guy.
So I have to ask you a question. If someone placed an order for an amplifier and you thought they would have been shopping at MFJ, did you have to put in a extra screw inside the case that would rattle around to go with the amplifier?
That's so bad.
Yeah, it happens.
Asking for a friend.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah, all of us. I mean, we hate that when that happens. Occasionally what will happen is like, what is that? I can't see. it's a SO239 jack.
Yeah, it's a slip-on SO239.
This is an SO239 that so I work at a candy store part-time. We sell candy from Yesu, Flex, and Icom and others, right? And I pulled this off of an MFJ appliance. So for the listeners on the podcast, this is an SO239 that's missing the threads, and somehow that made it past multiple levels of QA. Right. Oh, and it says SO239, but it should say yeah, it does say SO239. Yeah, that's amazing. Correct, yeah, that is correct.
That's a collector's item.
But actually, to be honest, he had a lot of really good working stuff, and they usually would, even if you had their tuners and say something broke in it, they're really good. They replace parts and do all. We all bought it. It's all we all used it at one time.
MFJ is a favorite whipping boy of the hobby, but I've never been an MFJ hater.
No, I'm not. I've never been a hater.
Devices I've had from that. Me too. From MFJ have actually been quite good.
No, they've actually good.
I've bought many things from MFJ, and I have to say that on more than one occasion, they did come with a screw that was rattling around in the box. However, it was also the cheapest thing on the market that did what it did, and it worked perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I just had to take it apart and take the screw out of it.
Yeah.
Well,
you're motivated to make it work better, right? If you're ham, you go in there and I always cleaned all the surfaces on the stuff to make sure it got good grounding inside the tuners and things like that.
It was the 259 the battery got turned on all the time.
Oh.
Are you going to pull us out of the trap?
I'm trying to pull us towards the end here. I want to end with one last question, Eric, before you go.
Okay.
And it's not about announcing a new product that you're not going to announce or anything. But we talked about remote operating a bunch, and the amount of technology and time and effort it takes for a company like Elecraft or Flex or anybody to put into a radio to be able to do what it does is phenomenal, considering the size of the market. So that's amazing. And yet there's always something else you can dream up and imagine. And I'm not asking you for, what's the next product, but like as Eric, if you think about, well, what other kind of stuff could you imagine maybe Elecraft or somebody else doing in the future in this remote space? What are the kinds of things can you imagine might be useful?
Gosh, that's a good question. You're going to see a lot. You're going to see some AI stuff get in there to help operators on stuff, I'm sure. But
thank God my CW will improve.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Or noise reduction, right now people
noise reduction.
Oh, no kidding.
There's noise, there's stuff, but right now it's getting done, over the internet and sort of you can get it done that way, but that's not great carrying your radio around that way. And I know a lot of us are looking at that in terms of what we can embed in the radios and what level of, with limited processing power we've got, or what can we put in there that's higher, or what are people willing to pay for it too? AI is pretty power hungry too, but that's a challenge on, of course, the QRP stuff. But I don't know. You're going to see. We a lot of times it's opportunistic. It's we in our case, because we hit we hit amplifier market, we hit the radio market. We've got both in the QRP and the higher power radios. We sort of swing back and forth on which ones we focus on, and in terms of new things. I got lots of little things in the works I can't talk about, but
sure.
I have no idea when they're going to pop out sometimes, or whether we're going to,
if at all, right?
Yeah, or we kill it. I can't tell you how many different prototypes of things we built on the way to the K4. That was interesting.
I have finally, I think, learned my lesson to not talk about products before I'm ready to release them.
Yeah, it just takes a lot of time. Good luck. We all slip up, but we all make that mistake.
Sorry, Mark, what was it that was releasing that you've talked about that I missed?
Too soon, Vince. Soon.
Too soon.
All right.
You better bleep that one out, George.
No, not a chance.
So everybody knows what it is.
So I think we'll leave it
Mark
at that.
Mark told me I'm number one with a visual indicator.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You are number one. So Eric, any parting thoughts for the listeners?
Well, I'd say, I think the key thing about any hobby is to keep having fun at it. And Wayne and I are still having fun doing this. I hope they're still having fun using our stuff. And I actually, both of us actively use our products and our competitors' products and everything else, not just because we're doing competitive research, but we actually enjoy operating with different things. So it's sort of nice to hear other people get enthusiastic. And that's what we go to, on the show. So give us both positive and negative feedback. We have no problem with that. But it's been a good run, and we're still doing it. So.
Well, thanks for doing it.
Yeah.
I think everybody here, we've all either own or love playing with Elecraft radios.
Totally.
And it's really a treat to work with a product that was made by people who really understand the problem they're trying to solve and are really able to execute on it. And we
Well,
all
thanks,
get to be
yeah.
the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah, I've got just one thing to add, Eric. You said earlier on, as a design engineer, your job is to try to impress your boss or to get fired. I'm going to add a third one, or start your own company.
Oh, sure. Like,
Very good, Vince.
I've been working for myself now since 1990. When was it? 91, I think.
You told me it was,
I did another company called Verisys that made, of all things, protocol analyzers for the parallel SCSI bus back when that was still a big thing.
Holy.
Oh, but it's a very poorly designed, designed. Oh, I know, but actually it was a very profitable business because we were selling to IBM and at Apple and Adaptec and Seagate, anybody that made hard drives, tape backups, large system. Because it's a horribly specified. They had the specification, the standard. What had a lot of loopholes, and you could plug in two vendors' things, and they'd have something failed on a big server farm, or those days they called them something different.
I think you're triggering Mike right now.
Yeah, Mike is being triggered.
But anyway,
I come into the tape backup world, and SCSI bus resets made me
I was
a lot
head of
money.
engineering for Mountain Computer in the tape backup world back in those days. Those were all my designs. And,
Mike is groaning because of bus and tag.
Yeah, well, they're all.
That's why he's groaning.
That's my 370 days.
Yeah, there we go.
We were cartridge backup in our stuff, but what I'm saying is that was a successful business. I actually sold out of that to start Elecraft. So that was the 1990 July of 98. I went full time on Elecraft, and we sold our first K2 in end of January 99. So
awesome.
And back then, would you have imagined it would have turned into what it is today?
Yeah, I was shooting for that. Yeah.
That was the plan.
Yeah, that was the plan. Maybe a little sooner. We were pretty small for the first few years because we were all QRP stuff. But the plan on the K2 is to do a 100-watt version of it. So within a couple of years, we had that top cover that made it a 100-watt radio. I can't get those parts anymore. I'd like to keep selling that part of it. But people hook it up to the KXPA 100, which you like, George. So that works out real well. It never happens as fast as you want, and I, having been through the experience in the prior company where I made sure that was profitable from the start also, that I understood the financial side. So
yeah, overnight success usually takes 10 years.
On Friday, I'm going to ask you to reiterate that phrase about it never happens as fast as you want.
I'm on year 4.
It's so
now.
true. Yeah, it's so true. Well, yeah, and also it's realizing some products are great designs but aren't the right fit for the market. That happens, or it's not economical because tariffs make it too expensive, or something else. These days, or I'm not saying something like that's happening right now, but what I'm saying is parts go obsolete. At a certain point, you say, what's the engineering time I have to put into it to re-engineer around it? I know you've gone through that, and some of the stuff you've been through with Mike, and we all have, and we all have to design. We had an LCD company literally go away on us on the K4. We had to re-engineer around a new LCD, which required, and to keep. Luckily, I had inventory of the other stuff before they went away. I knew they were going away.
Maestro,
twice on displays.
Yeah, it's just drives you nuts, and it's not trivial sometimes. It's a fire drill, but you make it through those things. But that luckily was a shipping product, or unluckily, I'm not sure which, because it was right during COVID too, so it was a rather panicky time. But you also find other things that you thought you were going to be able to design, and then parts go obsolete. And we had all the design on paper and we couldn't release it. That kind of stuff happens too. So you have a lot of roller coaster rides in these businesses. It's not a free lunch.
Yeah. Well, Eric, it's been wonderful having you here and hearing the story behind the remote radio. Thanks for all the great customer service that you encourage your teams to do. You guys truly remember that without the customer, y'all could go home early.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
So.
We try, and even when we always try to make the unhappy ones happy too, which is not always possible. But there's people that are always that way. But that said, there are times we screw up, we don't realize it, and maybe someone's being really tough on us. But if they're right, we'll make it right. We'll figure out what the deal is. So.
Totally.
Yeah, you don't want to ever make the mistake of ignoring somebody. So,
No.
Well, thank you so much for carving out the time. I know this is a big time commitment, as I said at the beginning, given that Hamvention's right around the corner and that you've got a thing or two to do. Thanks for spending the time with us. And we'll do just a quick round. If anybody has any comments, Mark, how about you? Any last comments before we wrap?
No, you guys are awesome. Thank you for being my friends. Thank you for supporting me. Eric, thank you for making great radios. Actually, I lied. There was one story that I think Vince wants to tell, so I'll hand it over to Vince. But yeah, other than that, y'all are great. Thank you so much for being who you are. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. Vince?
I have nothing else to add. Go find me on YouTube. I'm just shy of 2,000 subs. I'd love to get over that number and keep building the content there.
Awesome. Mike?
Eric, good to see you again, and we are recording this before Dayton. Oh, Dayton was great. That's right. It was nice seeing you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
yeah, we had a great date, and we just it's amazing.
Kicked ass. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm really tired though, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thomas?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. It's been great, and yeah, we're all big fans, and you guys do such a wonderful job with your design, with your customer service, with everything you do. And I certainly like those are when we had the fire threaten our house a couple weekends ago.
Yeah.
It was I took all of my Elecraft gear and stuck it in the car, so like it made the cut out of all these.
Wow.
But he
reviews I
didn't
have.
get the dog.
Well,
Let's just finish the story.
You forgot the wife and the dog.
And left his passport behind.
Yeah, yeah. I did in all honesty, I did the first 15 minutes was all those important things: the dog, the family, the passports, and all those things. It was the next 45 minutes that I was going to go load it up, and so the Elecraft radios went first. So yeah, they're real keepers. So thank you.
Well, thanks.
So from all of us at the Ham Radio Workbench, 73.
7-3.
7.2.
23.
Be good humans.
All right.